Inside a cathedral, a priest called the name Nivea her back. Very quickly, a voice answered, yes. It belonged to a girl with blazing red hair and green eyes. She stepped forward. As she passed by a blonde girl with her hair tied in a ponytail, the girl lifted a handkerchief to wipe her tears, looked over, and exclaimed, "Oh my God." The priest angrily said, "Nivea, as one who belongs to House Her Back, you should not have caused such an incident." The people behind them whispered among themselves, "Oh, poor Rosanna. Who is she planning to make cry next?" The priest ground his teeth and reproached her. "You are a candidate for the position of Saintess, summoned by God, and yet you did such a thing. Not to just anyone, but to another candidate like Rosanna Pavis." The priest's words left Nivea confused. She asked back, "What do you mean?" But she received no answer. The priest continued speaking. "Do you not think that is a sin?" Since she did not understand the situation, Nivea frowned and asked, "What are you talking about?" This made the priest even angrier. He shouted, "Nivea, you shameless girl! You called Rosanna to your room, used filthy language, and committed a crime last night." Realizing what the issue was, Nivea let out a mocking laugh. But that only made the priest even more furious. He scolded her. "How dare you laugh? Do you find this amusing, Nivea?" She recalled, "All right, last night. Well, I did plan to do that. I was going to grab that blonde brat by the hair and punch her mouth in." Now, Nivea spoke up and called Priest Dezen, but he cut her off and said, "Stop denying your sin. Instead, beg Rosanna for forgiveness in front of everyone. Beg with all your sincerity." Nivea immediately retorted, "And what if I don't want to?" Her words startled Priest Dezen. He froze in shock. "Wait, what?" Rosanna was also baffled. "What if she doesn't want to? Is she insane?" Nivea's gaze was firm, her hair flowing around her. Priest Dezen snapped and raised his voice. "Who called whom is not the main issue. The main issue is that something terrible happened in that room. You two fought." A voice rang out. "Excuse me." Nivea cut off Priest Dezen's words, leaving him gaping. "Huh, old man." Nivea pointed at him. "That's right, old man. It's unfair for me to be the only one punished. I'm not the only one who caused this mess." Nivea pouted and said, "I didn't even hit her. I'm a victim here. My cheek got seriously abused, and in the end, I'm the culprit behind this whole mess." Priest Dezen's face turned pale as he blurted, "What?" She crossed her arms and said in a spoiled tone, "Oh, if I'd known this would happen, I would have slapped her for real. What a shame." Priest Dezen broke out in sweat and asked, "Rosanna?" Nivea was angry. Looking around, she saw that everyone there was whispering among themselves. She sighed and thought, Nivea Herback was not exactly such an easygoing person. But I have to act differently to change the situation, to become a woman with real power, enough to balance the power of the royal family. And because that damn fiancé abandoned her. But now that I've been reborn in this body, no, there's no way I'll let everything play out like that. Even though the things that matter to Nivea matter to me, too. Returning to reality, Nivea pointed at Rosanna and said, "What makes you think my fiancé would ever like you?" I told her to stop, but she tried to slap me. What idiot would just let herself get hit? So my hand simply moved by reflex to protect myself. Her words left Rosanna gaping. Her eyes rolled white. And it was not only Rosanna. Priest Dezen and everyone around them were in the same state, too shocked to speak. Nivea looked down at the clothes she was wearing and grumbled, "This isn't even a wedding dress, but it's ridiculously bulky. Every time I need to go to the bathroom, it's a whole process." After saying that, she grabbed the garment, took it off in one motion, and flung it into the air. Fortunately, it landed right on Priest Dezen's head. He had not yet escaped the shock of reality, but Nivea did not care. She said, "Believe me or not, that's up to you. I have no intention of staying here, acting naive, and letting you people lead me around by the nose anymore. Bye-bye, old man. Watch out for signs of memory loss." She smiled brightly as a reminder, turned around, and left. I can't believe this body lived in such a showy and suffocating place for 3 whole years. Nivea Herback, I don't admire your endurance, but I can't stand this place anymore. You really were patient, living here while putting up with all kinds of things. Life is only worth living when you get to do what you like and go with the flow. It's already been a week since I became Nivea Herback. At first, I couldn't believe it. The main character of the last novel I read, The Innocent Saintess, To Love or Not to Love, was Nivea Herback. As for me, I was once the world champion in archery. With innate talent and constant effort, my record was enough to make others jealous. But I got injured. My results declined sharply, too. And then the dull, tedious days passed by. I thought I would feel better after crying, so I found a ridiculously melodramatic novel to read. But she was furious. Jian sprang up while holding that novel. Veins bulged across her face. She cursed, "Damn it, what the hell is this?" At the same time, she tore the novel in half. She stomped on it repeatedly and cursed. "Rosanna, you rotten brat. And that Duke bastard too. What kind of garbage work is this, damn it?" She clutched her head and screamed. If it were me, I would have solved this whole mess ages ago. Her face turned pale and drenched in sweat as she said, "That was the last memory of my previous life. When I woke up, I had already become Nivea. And just like that, a week has already passed. It feels like I only became her yesterday." A shrill cry rang out. "Nivea, Nivea." She opened the door and answered coldly, "What?" making Rosanna flinch. "Rosanna," questioned Nivea, "why did you skip this afternoon's prayer lesson?" "I was supposed to be resting, but the head instructor told me to look after you because you didn't look well." Nivea smiled mockingly at ease, while Rosanna was already furious. Nivea said disdainfully, "Oh, did I? Fine, I'll deal with that later. So, can you leave now? My head feels a little dizzy." Rosanna trembled with anger and said, "They told me to come see you." Seeing through the situation, Nivea said bluntly, "You came here because you were forced to, right? Why are you meddling so much instead of leaving? Your voice is too loud. It's making me tired." Rosanna, provoked, muttered, "Nivea her back. I've noticed you acting rather strange these past few days. But it seems you've completely become a lunatic." At that moment, Nivea continued, "I see. If you're done talking, you can leave now." Her words were gentle, but in Nivea's mind at that moment, she was thinking, "Hurry up and get lost for me. I am tired." Rosanna's face darkened, and she ground her teeth. "Whether I want to leave or not is my business." Nivea, fed up, said frankly, "You really like behaving like a stubborn 5-year-old, don't you?" Rosanna flew into a rage and even fumbled her words. "You, someone as useless as you. How dare you set foot in here? How dare you defile this sacred temple?" She pointed at Nivea's face and cursed viciously. "You foolish idiot. Know your place, you bitch. Do you understand human language?" Rosanna laughed scornfully. It's because you're like this that your fiancé wants to call off the marriage and come to me." Seeing Nivea say nothing, Rosanna showed a triumphant expression and secretly rejoiced. You're too shocked to speak, aren't you? As usual, I am the winner." Her thoughts were cut off by Nivea's words. "Sound good." Nivea smiled brightly, raised her thumb, and added, "Go ahead and marry him." Rosanna was surprised. What? Nivea her back opened her sparkling eyes wide, smiled, raised her thumb, and said to Rosanna Pavis, "That sounds good. Go ahead and marry him." Rosanna Pavis could not understand what was happening. What? With an innocent face, Nivea spread her arms and said, "A two-timing scumbag like that is nowhere near good enough for me. Trash belongs with a trash can." Hearing that, Rosanna became furious and clenched her fist. Unable to control her anger, Rosanna raised her hand to slap Nivea. "You!" Nivea, startled, dodged Rosanna's slap and thought, "Why is she resorting to violence?" Nivea raised a hand to her chin and assessed Rosanna. "Tisich, I let my guard down. Maybe it's because I'm not used to this body yet." Rosanna still could not restrain her anger and raised her hand to slap Nivea a second time. "How dare you?" Nivea could not take it anymore either. Before Rosanna could touch her, she swiftly grabbed Rosanna by the hair. Rosanna screamed. In pain, Rosanna shouted, "Let me go already." While still holding Rosanna's hair, Nivea spoke with an angry face. "Who do you think you are, trying to talk to me with your fists?" Rosanna yelled, "Let go right now." Nivea frowned with lifeless eyes. "Are you ordering me around? Heaven has a gate, yet you refuse to enter and keep walking into hell instead." Rosanna remained stubborn. "Let go of me." Nivea frowned and shoved Rosanna to the ground. Rosanna fell and could not endure the pain. "Ouch!" Nivea touched her neck and spoke in an indifferent voice. "Hey." Nivea said to Rosanna, "Get lost if you don't want to become a bald saintess." Those words struck Rosanna like a bolt from the blue, and she ran away clutching her head. After leaving the temple, Nivea wore more comfortable clothing, carried a bag in her hand, and reassessed herself. Dressing like this makes moving around much easier than wearing that bulky dress. Nivea searched through her memories and recalled, "Now that I think about it, Nivea found several treasures inside the bag. Good thing they're still safe. Nivea thought to herself, life is so difficult. What a wild ride. She did not understand why. I took over the body of Nivea, the female lead of the novel The Innocent Saintess, to love or not to love. Thinking of Nivea's body collapsing helplessly in a pool of blood, the person who would have to die. With the book lying open and one page still unread, she thought, I still hadn't finished reading it. But it was only one page, so it probably wouldn't change much. She imagined the scene again, Nivea waving goodbye to everyone in a halo of light, while Rosanna suffered a humiliating defeat. In the novel, everything went smoothly until Nivea was chosen as the Saintess. But that was the beginning of an unforeseen tragedy. She remembered the figure of the fiancé, the Duke who used Nivea and rose in rebellion with support from the temple. She lost everything, collapsed to the ground, and lifted her small, powerless hands, wanting to cling to her fiancé. Nivea could not use her Saintess power, was used like a puppet, and was then abandoned by the Duke and the temple. Returning to reality, her face was full of determination. Right now, I know there is only one way to avoid the death flag, and that is not to become the Saintess. Nivea walked down the street and thought. According to the principles, House Herback lies southeast of Ericilia, the capital of this kingdom. With a contemplative expression, she looked around. It would probably take a week or more to get from here there by carriage. If I run away now, I should have enough time, right? The scenery was filled with ancient buildings towering high into the sky, connected together and surrounded by tall mountains. The kingdom of Ericin, she thought. According to legend, many years ago, the other continents were all swallowed by the sea. Because of God's wrath, Nivea walked along the bustling street full of people and continued. And now, only 2 kingdoms remain. After the war, their rulers often changed. Ericin, where I live, and the kingdom of Akin. Suddenly, a man holding a large trumpet blew it to announce to everyone, His Grace the Duke is arriving. Nivea turned back in a panic and looked at the Duke. She suppressed the bad feeling in her heart and lowered her head. The person being welcomed is the Duke. Damn it, I can't let myself get caught. As she blended into the crowd, standing in greeting, she thought, surely he won't. Suddenly, a chill ran down her spine. She secretly raised her head to look. Her gaze met the Duke's as he rode on a black horse. Their eyes remained locked for a moment. Nivea admitted defeat. I can't rely on luck. She straightened up, turned her head, and intended to flee from that place before being caught. Run! What are you waiting for? The longer I stay here, the more dangerous it gets. The Duke did not act according to common sense. He rode his horse after her, ignoring all the chaos around him. Your Grace, it's dangerous. Nivea used all her strength to escape the rider pursuing her from behind, worrying as she ran. If I'm caught, it's bye-bye to my free life. After running only a short distance, Nivea's body could no longer hold up. Sweat poured from her. What kind of stamina is this? It's so weak. I only ran a little, and I'm already panting like a dog. As she anxiously looked behind her, she wondered, if I stop, maybe he won't chase me anymore, right? She was shocked and helpless. Why does that bastard keep chasing me? What does he want from me? I just want to go home peacefully. After running a bit farther, ugh, I'm tired. I need to find a narrow place so he can't chase me. And so, she quickly turned into an alley. Unfortunately, it was a dead end, and she could not go any farther. She clenched her fist in anger. Damn it! The Duke softly called out, uncertainly. Nia. Nivea knew there was no way back. She turned around and faced the Duke with a determined expression. The Duke's eyes were filled with surprise. Nivea thought to herself, this scumbag male lead. She looked at the Duke riding on a black horse, a halo of light seemingly shining behind him. It's Antios Timotero. He's so handsome. Antios Timotero, Nivea's fiancé. Nivea furrowed her brows. This man, whose head is big, but whose brain is like a grape, is Nivea's fiancé, the stupid bastard who was seduced by Rosanna. I can't lie to myself, though. This scumbag male lead is way too handsome. Antios dismounted from his horse. While keeping one hand on the horse's back, he asked Nivea, Why are you here, Nia? Antios corrected his tone. No, why are you pretending not to know me? Why are you here instead of at the temple? Antios looked at Nivea for a moment, then asked again, And what are you wearing? Nivea did not want to keep listening. She raised her hand. Stop. Antios did not understand what was going on. Nivea spoke to her fiancé while raising her hand to stop Antios from coming closer. Please do not take another step closer, Your Grace. Antios gave in. All right, I won't ask anymore. Antios held out his hand toward Nivea. It's dangerous for you to wander outside alone like this. I will escort you back to the temple. Nivea smiled faintly. Antios was bewildered, unable to understand what Nivea wanted. What is wrong? I will escort you back. Why are you not behaving like usual? Stop being stubborn. And Nivea lifted a hand to brush back her hair, smiled brightly, and cut Antios off. What am I usually like? Oh, that's right. You don't even know what kind of person I am. She remembered Nivea in the novel. I waited and waited, hoping you would turn around and look at me. But have you ever thought about how I felt when you kept turning your back and walking away like that? Nivea resentfully said, Do you not have hands? Or are you illiterate? I waited for so long. But you never once wrote back. Antios cut in, wanting to explain himself. That was because Nia. Calm down and listen to me, Nia. Nivea growled. What good would that do? Her face was full of resentment. Your Grace has never listened to me. So why should I listen to you when I do not want to? You never listen to me. So please listen this time. I will only say this once. So listen carefully. Antios had no choice but to listen and could not argue. Nivea gathered all her courage and continued, Let us annul our engagement. Nivea tightly gripped the basket in her hand and spoke in a firm voice. Let us annul our engagement. Antios Timotero frowned, as if he did not understand what Nivea meant. What? Nivea repeated her words once again. I said, let us annul our engagement. Suddenly, a voice interrupted their conversation. Your Grace. Your Grace. A subordinate knelt down, panting as he urgently said, Why did you suddenly leave the procession? His Majesty has issued a summons for you. He is urging you repeatedly, Your Grace Antios Timotero. We must hurry. Your Grace Antios Timotero looked at her sadly and asked again, Are you serious, Nia? She gently said, I have always been. Nivea smiled beautifully and brightly, but sincere with your Grace. She coldly walked past Antios Timotero. I hope we never meet again. On a beautiful sunset afternoon, she looked around curiously and wondered to herself, should I demand compensation for emotional damages? Nivea shook her head. Forget it. Whatever. Taking dirty money feels like it would sting deep in my heart. She asked a passerby, Excuse me, where's the pawn shop? The man immediately glanced behind himself, then pointed toward a shop. It's over there. At the shop, the clerk said cheerfully, Welcome. He handed over the bag of items and politely said, Thank you. Thank you for your cooperation, miss. She thought to herself, with money, you can have anything. A row of large carriages gave off an elegant, luxurious air. Nivea looked around, thinking. The pawn shop owner said, Where could it be? She spoke up. Excuse me. He replied in surprise. Welcome, valued customer. With bright, round eyes, she asked cheerfully, Do you have any carriages going to Avio? He asked back, Avio. He looked sorrowful and regretful. Unfortunately, no. Nivea slammed the table and shouted, What? Then is there anything that passes by there? He sighed. Mrs., please don't mention that place anymore. Scratching his head, he explained, There are many monsters and bandits along the southeastern route, so there's no transportation going that way. We've suffered heavy losses every time we've taken passengers there. Hearing him say that, she broke out in a cold sweat and collapsed in fear. She thought, I'm doomed. She said gloomily, But I need to leave right away. Then, dejected like a ghost, she turned to leave. Behind her, the man suddenly remembered something and said, I just remembered. There's a knight who was planning to head southeast. He asked us to look after his horse for a while. When she heard that, she shouted loudly, Really? Who is he? The man trembled in fear. I don't remember his appearance very clearly, but I'm fairly sure he was very tall and well-built. He pointed behind her, and he had very broad shoulders. There he is, over in that direction. Hearing him pointed out, she turned around and stared in astonishment. The large young man's back was visible as he mounted his horse. Someone spoke up. Excuse me. He was about to turn his face. Sir Knight. His handsome features were well-balanced. His skin was fair and radiant. He was so good-looking that anyone who saw him could be knocked off their feet by his beauty. Nivea stared at him without blinking. Her face flushed as she praised him in a daze. Oh my gosh, he's so handsome. Phil looked at Nivea and asked what. Realizing she had spoken too openly, she hesitated and tried to explain. What I meant was, she clasped her hands together, her round eyes sparkling cutely as she asked, Sir Knight, I heard that you're planning to head southeast. Is that right? Phil said coldly. What does that have to do with you? Tears shimmered in her eyes, about to fall. She pleaded, I truly have to return to my hometown immediately. There's an urgent family matter. He looked at her with a frown, anger in his eyes. That's none of my business. On the outside, she acted delicate. "Oh, Sir Knight, how can you say something so harsh? I'm in such a hurry. You have a family too, don't you, Sir Knight?" But behind her back, she raised her middle finger and cursed inwardly. "You heartless bastard. His love for humanity has dried up like the Sahara Desert." She wiped her tears with a handkerchief and poured out her hardship. "I haven't seen my family in 3 years, but I received urgent news and need to go home immediately. Yet there are no carriages left." Phil looked away, avoiding her gaze. "That's none of my business." Hearing that, she froze in fury and cursed inwardly. "You greedy demon." But Nivea held back the anger in her heart and cried, tears streaming down both cheeks. "Please, Sir Knight, I'll pay you." He rejected her coldly. "No need." She continued pouring out her troubles. "Sir Knight, I still have 7 younger siblings waiting at home." Finding her annoying, he shouted, "Please move aside." She cursed inwardly. Did a dog run off with his personality, or what? "You hateful villain of the world." Still, Nivea remained determined to find some way to borrow his horse. "Please, Sir Knight, I can also treat wounds. I can use about 2, so I won't get in your way." She thought, wow, are there no normal men in this world? They only look good on the outside. Inside, they're nothing but mud. With tears in her eyes, she begged, "Please, you ba." She almost slipped up and cursed him, but she managed to stop before finishing the sentence. She nearly let it slip, but Phil remained silent and gave no response, making her lose her temper. She thought, "Tisich, it'd be faster to find another way. I'm wasting time trying to persuade this stubborn blockhead." In other words, he was impossibly obstinate. Suddenly, a small hand grabbed Nivea's clothes. She immediately turned to see who had tugged at her. A voice called out, "Big sister." She looked down toward the one who had called her. It was a little girl with messy hair and disheveled clothes, clutching Nivea's dress. With pleading eyes, the haggard, skinny, weak-looking girl asked, "I'm so hungry. Could you give me a coin, please?" The little girl begged Nivea, "Please, miss." Nivea stared with round eyes, so shocked she could not speak. The little girl was gaunt, her face lifeless and her eyes sorrowful. Nivea glanced to the side, not understanding what was happening, a question mark forming in her mind. She saw 2 more small children, poor and hungry, holding hands as they looked at her. Those 2 children were also thin, staring blankly. She crouched down and asked, "Is your name Laura?" The little girl shyly lowered her head toward the ground, gripping and crumpling her skirt with both hands. "Yes." Nivea gently told the child, "Look at me." Nivea placed her hand on the child's head and praised her. "Your eyes are a very beautiful color." She smiled brightly. "Are you here with your younger siblings? Call them over. Then this big sister will buy you lots of delicious food." As if she could not believe it, the little girl asked, "Really?" Nivea immediately confirmed it for the child. Of course. Her eyes sparkled as she looked at the children with gentle affection. Suddenly, Phil's hand grabbed her shoulder. "You," she said softly, "yes?" When she turned around, she saw the man she had been begging all this time, the one who had refused to let her borrow his horse. She thought, the knight from earlier? He treated me like air just now. So why is he talking to me now? What is he planning? Nivea was angry, while he simply looked at her without saying a word. Without explanation, Phil clearly told her, "Come with me." On the way, Phil wore a cold expression, constantly thinking about something and paying no attention to his surroundings. Meanwhile, Nivea Herback walked beside him and kept watching Phil. Phil turned to her with a cold expression, a trace of anger on his face, and asked Nivea Herback, "What were you thinking doing something like that?" Nivea Herback looked at Phil in slight confusion and said, "I don't understand what you mean." Phil asked Nivea Herback, "Do you know those children?" Nivea Herback was surprised and wondered to herself, "What? He brought me along just to ask this." Nivea Herback answered Phil, "Of course not. I only met them today." Phil asked again irritably, "Then why did you buy them food?" Nivea Herback also felt displeased by Phil's question. Nivea Herback crossed her arms, frowned, and replied, "Because the children were hungry." Phil fired question after question at Nivea Herback, his angry face making it seem as if he were interrogating her like a criminal. "Are you planning to feed them every day from now on? Are you planning to take them with you and raise them? Are you planning to take responsibility for them?" Nivea Herback rubbed her thumb and index finger together as she thought, "If this guy keeps talking nonsense like this, I'm going to explode." "Damn him." Angry and annoyed, she said, "What does it have to do with you if I use my own money?" Phil frowned furiously. His eyes stared at Nivea Herback like sparks. Phil's whole body seemed wrapped in the darkness of rage, giving off a chilling aura. Grinding his teeth, Phil said loudly, "Money is not the issue." Seeing Phil in front of her like that frightened Nivea her back, and her face went pale. Nivea her back frowned helplessly. "This bastard is making my blood boil. I can't believe the day has come when I have to deal with a muscle brain type like this." Nivea Herback brushed her hair back with her hand and, without asking, said with anger mixed with a little fear, I'm getting annoyed. Then what is the issue?" Phil angrily asked Nivea Herback, "Have you ever thought that your good deed might poison those children?" The children standing nearby were also curious and began paying attention to their conversation. Phil told Nivea Herback, "These children desperately want to be loved. Do you think what they need is your humanitarian gesture?" Phil spoke as if shouting in Nivea Herback's face, "If you don't intend to take responsibility for them until the end of their lives, then don't show them sympathy in the first place." Nivea Herback smiled and lowered her face, having understood the concern he felt for the children. Nivea Herback raised a hand to tuck her bangs behind her ear, smiling brightly and revealing her graceful beauty as she said, "If you think that way about these children, then why don't you buy them food tomorrow?" Phil was still angry as he asked Nivea Herback, "What?" Nivea Herback replied, "That's quite a deep thought. Then have you ever thought about this?" Nivea Herback looked at the children standing nearby, caring for and loving one another, and continued, "In order to keep her siblings from going hungry, that child had to endure rejection from dozens, even hundreds of people." Hearing these words from Nivea Herback made Phil stand frozen in place, his face dark. Nivea Herback smiled mockingly at Phil and asked, "Do you understand how it feels to be rejected?" Then she answered herself, "Of course you don't." Nivea Herback clenched her fist and said, "No one can endure rejection forever. Each time you experience it, you gradually realize how powerless you are and lose all your confidence." Nivea Herback's words were firm and resolute. Take responsibility for your actions. Can sympathy fill your stomach? As long as they don't have to starve today, that's enough. Phil seemed to realize something from Nivea Herback's words. Phil's eyes began to widen, and his anger disappeared entirely. Nivea Herback shouted at Phil, "Abandoning them is the real poison." Nivea Herback stepped closer and shouted loudly, a hint of irritation mixed in because she empathized with the children's situation. "Those children have to go hungry every day largely because of people like you." Facing Nivea Herback, Phil now looked at her somewhat helplessly. In response to Nivea Herback's actions, Phil said nothing and merely smiled in silence. Nivea Herback turned away and said over her shoulder, "Today, it's me. Tomorrow, it could be you. And if someone else thinks the same way I do and gives these children a meal, then, at the very least, they won't starve to death." Nivea Herback turned back and continued walking as she added, "And if you can't do that, then don't get in the way of others." After saying that, she reached her hand toward the children and called, "Kids, let's go eat." She left Phil standing there, watching Nivea Herback and those poor children. Suddenly, Phil reached his hand toward Nivea Herback, intending to call her back, but she had already gone far away. He said, Phil watched as Nivea Herback carried a small child in her arms while the other two children happily walked beside her. Then he thought about what Nivea Herback had just said, pondering the words, "Getting in the way, huh?" The children were very happy at the table, eating the food with delight. Nivea Herback asked the children, "Is it good? There's plenty more, so eat as much as you like." Slowly now, the three children answered in unison, their mouths still full of food. "Yes, miss." Seeing the eldest child eating too quickly and looking embarrassed, Nivea Herback hurriedly offered her a cup of water and said, "Here, drink some water, Laura." Looking at the three children in front of her, eating happily and with great appetite, Nivea Herback asked, "How is the food? Is it good?" The eldest was named Laura. The second was named Roy. The youngest was Rosie. As they ate, they answered in unison, "It's so good." Nivea Herback happily rested her chin on both hands on the table and asked, "Laura, where do you live? What about your parents?" Rosie's cheeks were round and puffy like buns, her mouth still full of food, and her eyes sparkled as she looked at Nivea Herback and said, "It's so yummy." Nivea Herback looked at Rosie with joy and happiness. With a bit of food still stuck to her mouth, Laura answered sadly. Our home is behind the alley of the 12th tower. As for our parents, at that point, Laura hesitated and fell silent. Seeing that, Nivea Herback realized the girl did not want to mention it. She gently stroked Laura's head and said, "It's all right. You don't have to say any more." Then she asked, "Is there any adult taking care of you?" Laura thought for a moment and said, "There's a person who wears white clothes. He comes sometimes. He brings food for kids like us." From Laura's description, Nivea Herback guessed to herself, he's probably some kind of priest. And she silently worried about the lives of the 3 children. But that still isn't enough for them to live well. She recalled Phil angrily saying earlier, "If you don't intend to take responsibility for their lives, then don't show them sympathy in the first place." Thinking back on it, Nivea Herback felt a little irritated. She crossed her arms and thought, "Even so, am I supposed to abandon a child who came to me begging for help?" Nivea Herback let out a sigh and cursed Phil inwardly. That damn show-off bastard. Nivea Herback had prepared 3 portions of food for the 3 children. She raised a hand and wiped the beads of sweat from her forehead. This should be enough for a month. Laura's eyes filled with tears, moved by Nivea Herback's kindness. "Big sister." Nivea Herback bent down to look at the 3 children and said goodbye. "Laura, Roy, Rosie, it's time for me to go home now, so we have to say goodbye." Rosie did not want to part so soon and tearfully called, "Big sister." Seeing how adorable Rosie was, Nivea Herback bent down and affectionately pinched her cheek. "Rosie, I promise I'll come visit you if I have the chance to come back here. So remember to listen to your sister, okay?" Rosie still sniffled. Suddenly, 4 young men appeared out of nowhere. 3 were skinny and 1 was fat, and they did not look well-intentioned. Well, what a cool big sister. Startled, Nivea Herback turned around. "If you want to help people in trouble, why don't you share with us too, big sister?" Nivea Herback felt somewhat worried and afraid. She raised her hand to shield the 3 children and calmly replied, "I'm pretty sure I don't have any little sisters with beards like yours." Elsewhere, Phil was stroking his horse while thinking about what Nivea Herback had said. Abandoning them is the real poison. Those children have to go hungry every day because of people like you. He could not help falling into deep thought and sighing. Suddenly, Phil was startled and looked down at his feet. 3 children were tugging at the hem of his clothes and crying as they called out repeatedly, "Sir Knight, Sir Knight." Because little Rosie still could not speak clearly, she could only call Phil Mister. She still clung desperately to the edge of Phil's cloak. Laura gripped Phil's clothes tightly, crying and pleading tearfully, "Please, sir, please save big sister." After hearing Laura's words, Phil was startled and looked worriedly toward the road Nivea Herback had taken earlier. Nivea bravely stood blocking the path in front of the children and urged them, "Go quickly, Laura. Hurry." Hearing that, the little girl called out in fear, "Big sister," meaning she wanted Nivea to come with them. But Nivea cut her off. "Hurry." She waited until the children had left. Then she slowly turned her face back toward the thugs and asked them, "So what do you want? Money again, right?" Seeing that she seemed to understand their scheme, every one of them broke into a crafty smile. One of them spoke up, Well, you're a smart one, big sister." Looking at the cramped space around her, she sensed that the current situation had gone beyond her expectations. Nivea was secretly frightened. She blamed herself for focusing on taking the children home and forgetting that this place was rather deserted and narrow. "What should I do? If I run with all my strength, can I get out of here? Damn it, this isn't my real body." Suddenly, she realized the man who had just spoken looked somewhat familiar. "I feel like I've met this nobody somewhere before." Then she let out a surprised and asked him, "You're the one who gave me directions this morning, aren't you?" Hearing that, he scratched his head and asked in some confusion, "Huh?" Then, as if realizing something, he laughed loudly. You got a good memory, big sister." Knowing she had not remembered wrong, she continued asking, "You're the one who showed me where the pawn shop was, right?" He answered casually, "That's right. I was in a good mood then, so I helped you out." Then the whole group burst into laughter. The man in blue spoke again. "See, big sister, I love sticking my nose into the affairs of people in this village." Frightened by how insane these people were, Nivea could only try to appear calm as she responded to them, refusing to let herself be put at a disadvantage before these men. Her expression darkened as she continued the conversation. "What do you want? Money, right?" As if he had heard something very funny, the man smiled contemptuously and teased her. "Let's see. Since I gave you directions, I'll need to charge a service fee too. You're smart, so you understand, don't you? Hearing such unreasonable words, Nivea could only curse inwardly. Service fee, my ass. But in order to resolve things quickly, she had no choice but to compromise with them. She crossed her arms and replied, "Fine, I'll give you 10% of what I have. That should be enough for you lot to drink as much as you want all night." At first, when they heard her say that, they seemed slightly stunned. But then the whole group burst into laughter again. Listen to this. Big Sister says, as he spoke, he reached out, took hold of her hair, and toyed with it. "Don't you know how much a prostitute with hair like this could earn?" She froze and asked back, "A prostitute?" After realizing their true intention, she slapped away the hand of the man in front of her who was holding her hair. Seeing her attitude, he put on a very surprised expression and said, "It seems you're seriously misunderstanding things, Big Sister." His expression gradually turned cunning as he threatened her. "Even if you gave us all the money you have, it wouldn't be worth even a quarter of the value of your body." The more she heard, the more frightened she became. She could only lie to them to get through this. "You'll regret this. Someone is coming to look for me." However, she had already anticipated one thing. That man had seen through it all. "Like I'm supposed to believe you've been alone all day. Don't act like I don't know." The moment he finished speaking, the biggest guy in the group walked up from behind and said to the man from before, "Hey, Mickey, can we try the goods before selling them?" But he was immediately shot down. "Get that idea out of your head, CACAO." Even so, the fat man kept pleading with him. Feeling like there was no reasoning with his teammate, Mickey ignored him and continued talking to Nivea. "Oh wow, her complexion and looks are top-notch. We'll be able to live in luxury for years, not just a single day." Those insulting words made her absolutely furious. Without hesitating any longer, she spat straight in his face. He then shouted, "Damn it." Feeling humiliated, he cursed loudly, "You damned bitch." Before he could react, she drove her elbow straight into his face. Immediately after, her eyes flashed, and she kicked him right in the family jewels. From now on, that guy probably would not be able to go around harming other people's daughters anymore. The shock was so great that it felt as if time had stopped. Then his companion's horrified screams rang out one after another. "Mickey, you're still intact, right? Are you okay? Who would have thought that little brat would dare?" Mickey's nose was now streaming blood. Trembling, he shouted, "Shut up and grab that bitch who ruined my manhood." But that was easier said than done. Nivea had already seized the chance while they were caught off guard and fled long ago. As she ran, she gloated, "Serves you right, you bastard. Scum like that should be sterilized to bring peace to humanity. If the eggs are broken, might as well fry them." But she had not gotten far before she heard the voices of the thugs from before. "There she is. Catch her." Things really had gone from bad to worse. The harder she tried to run, the more exhausted she became. On top of that, she ran into an obstacle ahead. "Why is there a hill here? Nivea, why didn't you train your stamina? Now I'm the one suffering." This way, but just as she turned into an alley, she crashed into someone. The collision was so strong that she nearly fell backward. Fortunately, that person caught her and held her in his arms. When their eyes met, she finally realized it was Phil. Before she could recover from her shock, she heard his voice by her ear. "Are you all right?" Before she knew how to answer, a loud call rang out from behind her. "Big Sister." Only then did she snap back to her senses. She hugged the children who had just run over and asked them, "I told you to go home. Why did you run into such a dangerous place?" The three children were overjoyed to see her. They could only cling tightly to her and burst into tears. Big Sister, though she was very moved by the children's feelings, she understood what needed to be done now. She said to the man beside her, "This is urgent. Can you take the children away? I'll call the soldiers." But it was still too late. At that moment, the ruffians had already chased them down. From afar, she could hear their voices. "There she is. That she-devil. Catch that brat." Seeing them about to come closer, Nivea held Rosie in her arms and hurriedly urged the other two children, "Once I give the signal, run as fast as you can." In this situation, Phil stepped forward. He turned back and told her, "Stay here and watch the children. Wait for me." After saying that, he drew his sword and charged toward the thugs. Since she trusted his abilities to some extent, she knelt down and comforted the children. "Kids, remember to close your eyes and cover your ears for a little while." After settling the children, she turned back to check on the situation behind her. but the sight before her eyes made her unable to keep from exclaiming in shock. Is he even human? With only a few basic movements, he had already dealt with all those thugs. Then came a thud. Cupid's arrow had struck its target. Looking at Phil's unbelievably cool face, Nivea was completely dazed. Even when he walked toward her, she remained staring blankly at him. When he was right in front of her, Nivea thought in a daze, is he going to eliminate me too? But contrary to her thoughts, Phil asked her gently, are you hurt? Surprised, she stammered in reply, thanks to you. Inwardly, she thought, he actually helped me. Then she rubbed one child's head and said softly, you can open your eyes now. The children opened their eyes and immediately called out to her happily, big sister, big sister. Seeing that, Nivea was very happy. Then she turned to Phil and said, I'll take them home. He immediately offered to go with her. I think I should go with you, if you don't mind. After saying that, the two of them took the children back together. When they arrived, Nivea even gave the children a bag of food and reminded them, remember to find the guards if anything happens. All right. Laura answered, yes. Then the children waved goodbye to her and went inside. Nivea also smiled and waved goodbye to them. Then she immediately turned cold and asked Phil, how did you deal with those men? He answered, they should be judged as criminals. I called the guards, so by now, they should already be getting escorted away. Hearing that, she asked, did you deliberately go easy on them? Phil fell silent for a moment. Then he said, killing them would be as easy as crushing an ant. But that would change nothing. They must pay for their actions. Nivea fell into thought. Will they really be able to turn over a new leaf? As though he had seen what was on her mind, Phil added, I guarantee they will pay for what they have done. He placed a hand before his chest and affirmed, I swear it on everything I have. Seeing him like that, Nivea seemed a little moved and blushed. After that, Phil said awkwardly, I'm sorry. I was a bit rude earlier this morning. What you said wasn't wrong at all. Hearing that, she smiled and said, that's enough. Thank you for saving me. Then the two of them gazed at each other with the gentlest, most affectionate eyes. Suddenly, Nivea Herback's stomach growled, cutting through the atmosphere. She could only scratch her head awkwardly and ask, I haven't eaten anything. Do you know anywhere good? A while later, he took her to a restaurant. Nivea had a low alcohol tolerance. After only drinking a little wine, she grew resentful and angry. Listen to me. What did you think I was going to do to the children? Seeing her like that, he advised her to calm down. That wasn't what I meant. Hearing that, she shouted again. That's exactly what you meant. Just like that, she angrily pointed at him and poured out everything in her heart. That was what you meant, wasn't it? How could you think someone as beautiful and holy as me was a witch? How could you think I would eat those adorable children? He said calmly, well, there are rumors like that going around. Hearing that, she folded her arms angrily. Hey, I'm the one who almost got sold off. He became awkward. That's why I'm apologizing. Then she angrily said again, you got mad at me for such a stupid reason? He did not dare look her straight in the face and turn away. I was only worried about the children. Then he looked at her. Phil asked in confusion, how were you able to face those men so bravely? She only picked up a piece of sausage gently. You say I was brave? I'm a weak girl. So of course I know fear. The most precious thing is your life. Hearing her say that, he fell silent. Then he looked at her with an unreadable gaze. Would a weak girl go to a place full of wandering souls, invite a stranger to travel the world with her, and even kick someone in the vital spot? Hearing him say that, she shouted in embarrassment, hold it right there. I did that for the sake of my little life. Then she suddenly remembered something and asked him, do you know somewhere that sells weapons? Phil asked back in confusion, why are you asking? She sighed. Today I realized I need a weapon for self-defense. Hearing that, he handed her his dagger. Holding it in her hand, she asked in disbelief, I can have this. It looks pretty expensive. He replied, please accept it as my apology. Hearing that, she looked at him, surprised that he would give her such an expensive item. Then she said thoughtfully, to be honest, I've been thinking about what you said, and I realized you weren't entirely wrong either. We each have our own thoughts and viewpoints, so disagreements are unavoidable. Phil also admitted his fault. Just as you said, our ways of thinking may differ. However, forcing one's thoughts onto someone else is still wrong. That was my mistake. Then he looked at her pensively and held the dagger out to her again, making her a little surprised. But after that, she also replied cheerfully, is that so? Then I'll accept your apology. I've met many people, and those who can recognize their own mistakes are usually good people. Anyway, thank you. Without you, I would have been sold off. Then Nivea Herback held out her hand. I'm Nivea, and your name is? He blushed and said, "You can call me Kai." Then he shook her hand. "Okay." She then gave a thumbs up. "Now that we've shaken hands, let's travel the world together." He asked helplessly what. Her eyes sparkled. "Why not? You helped me a lot, so you should see it through to the end." We even introduced ourselves. Hearing that, he asked, "And what does that have to do with anything?" She took out the dagger and said, "And you gave me this dagger too." Phil replied bluntly, "That's a parting gift." But of course, she did not believe him. "Come on, traveling alone is so lonely. Take me with you and life will bloom like flowers." But he did not answer at all. Hearing that, she pretended to say, "Fine then. Since I have a weapon now, I can freely go look for the thugs around here." And hearing that, he said sternly, "You can't." Seeing that he had taken the bait, she asked with sparkling eyes, "Then you'll take me with you, right?" Though he did not say a word. To her, silence meant agreement. So she said, "Thank you, thank you. Ha, got you." A while later, she was completely drunk and started rambling nonsense. A knight who's both manly and cool. So manly it makes my heart want to fall apart. Then she said loudly, "So freaking strong." Phil could only freeze helplessly. With no other choice, Phil sighed. "Hey, can you stop drinking?" However, Nivea, in her thoroughly drunk state, looked at him with a dreamy face and asked back, "Huh? Who's this?" "Oh, it's Sir Knight." Then she leaned forward and raised her glass to him. "Teach me how to slash too. You only drew your sword, and those guys from earlier dropped so fast. You planned it all out, didn't you?" Helpless, he had no choice but to take her wine glass away. "Stop, you're drunk." Displeased by his action, she muttered dreamily in her drunken state, "What about you? You're drunk too, aren't you? Haha, you're so big, but you're weak. You just want to drink by yourself, don't you? You were planning to go to a second round alone and leave me behind, weren't you?" She suddenly stood upright, raised both hands, and shouted wildly, "How dare you do that to me? You can fool anyone else, but you can't fool someone as smart as me." After saying that, she collapsed face first onto the table and fell asleep. He sighed once again. Suddenly, from behind him, a burly man with his face covered walked up behind him. He knelt down and asked, "May this subordinate dispose of her?" However, Phil coldly refused. "Stop joking. It isn't funny." Though he heard Phil say that, the man still refused to give up on the idea. Suddenly, his eyes flashed as he came up with a new idea. Then, torture her. Enough. Tired of his subordinate's stubbornness, Phil could only rub his forehead helplessly. "Just go investigate her background." As if he had only been waiting for that, the man hurriedly ran off, leaving Phil behind. After confirming that his subordinate had left, he put on a contemplative expression and looked at the girl before him. "Herback. Someone from House Herback? I'm sure they're one of the noble families connected to Duke Edius's faction. Who would have thought she'd appear before me, on her own like this? For a spy to have such poor defenses, she might as well quit. But when is she going to wake up?" The next morning, Phil stood in front of Nivea's room and woke her up. "Wake up. We need to pack early before beginning the journey." Hearing that, she hurriedly answered, "It's so early, but I'm awake." After they left the inn, he walked while complaining about her. "I had to knock 34 times before you woke up. So what right do you have to talk?" Knowing the fault was hers, she showed an apologetic expression and explained to him, "Whenever I get drunk, it's hard for me to wake up early the next morning." After walking a little farther, they entered a weapon shop. Seeing customers arrive, the owner hurried out to receive them. "Welcome, dear customers. What would you like to buy?" Seeing the shopkeeper come over, she cheerfully made her request. "Let me see your bows, sir." Hearing her request, he looked a little troubled. Scratching his head, he asked again to be sure, "A bow and arrows? That kind of weapon doesn't really suit young ladies." But with her most sparkling gaze, she tried to persuade the shop owner. "It's fine. Show me all those babies." From behind her, Phil picked up a sword and said to her, "Archery takes a long time to learn. This long sword is lighter and easier to use in combat." Ignoring his words, she remained firm in her decision. "I'll take this one." After saying that, she turned to the shop owner. "Please show me some arrows, too." She ignored Phil's speechlessness behind her. Unable to understand her decision, he asked helplessly, "Why do you keep choosing a bow?" Then he unexpectedly heard her extremely bizarre answer. "You gave me a dagger. Add a bow to that, and I'll look insanely cool." After leaving the shop, they continued down the road leading out of town. Suddenly, as they were walking, an argument appeared ahead of them. A sharp female voice rang out loudly. "Are you sure?" She stopped by this place. As if recognizing that voice, Nivea panicked and cried out, "Oh no, trouble, trouble!" Then she hid behind his back. Surprised by her strange reaction, he turned around and asked her, "What's wrong?" Before he could figure out what was happening, the group on the other side grew noisy again. At their head was a blonde woman with her hair tied high, standing with her arms crossed as she cursed at the man opposite her. "I'm asking whether you saw her or not." Hearing that, the man hurriedly expressed that he was not lying. "I don't know whether she was a noble or not, but I did see a girl with red hair." Nivea turned back, secretly watching the situation over there, and inwardly guessed, "What is that girl Rosanna doing here?" The blonde continued threatening that poor man. Then which carriage did she get on? Afraid of offending their group, he could only answer helplessly, "I told you, there wasn't any carriage going to the place she wanted." As though still unsatisfied with that answer, she shouted loudly, "I want to know where that place was." Off to the side, Phil looked at the girl hiding behind him as she inwardly despised them. "Why is she like a restless ghost? I already left, so why is she following me? I can't stay here long." After a while, she turned to him and said, "Sir Knight, I'll go wait somewhere else." After saying that, she hurried away. Ignoring her, he went over to his horse and asked after it, "Did you rest well, Philip?" A shout rang out from behind him. That man had pointed toward Phil and said, "That girl asked to travel together with that knight yesterday." Seeing that trouble had come knocking at his door, he wearily pulled up his hood, placed his foot in the stirrup, and climbed onto the horse, intending to leave. But before he could leave, he was called back. It shouted from behind, "Sir Knight." With no choice, he turned his head and replied with a single word, "Yes." Hearing that, the woman asked arrogantly, "Then where did she run off to?" He asked back, "For what reason?" Seeing that he had no intention of answering them, Rosanna spoke to Phil in a condescending tone. "That is the temple's business. It has nothing to do with you. Hurry up and tell us where she is. The high priest has ordered us to find her as quickly as possible." Seeing how rudely they spoke, he no longer wanted to waste words. "If you won't tell me the reason, then I don't need to say anything either." Hearing his disdainful tone, the attendant beside her snapped and shouted, "You insolent man! Though you may be a knight, you should still bow and greet one of the two candidates for Saintess." When her attendant said, "One of the two," Rosanna exploded and turned to scold him. "One of the two? Are you out of your mind? I'm the only one." No longer wanting to say anything more to these fools, Phil turned away and left them with a blunt statement. "You keep going around in circles and never get to the point. I don't know where she is. That is all, so don't bother me. I'm not as idle as you people." Then he turned and walked away dashingly as if nothing had happened, leaving their group behind. The attendant from earlier cursed, "How rude." After leaving the village, Phil went deep into the forest. As he was walking, his horse suddenly stopped, as though it had discovered something. Phil said, "Come out." Knowing that he had been exposed, the masked shadow guard from the beginning appeared. He bowed to Phil and said, "Your subordinate is here." Phil asked sternly the Duke what his current plans were. The answer he received was that the man was exchanging letters with the southeastern nobles by hawk. Hearing that, he asked again if he could steal them. After thinking for a while, the young man replied to Phil that it would be difficult to tell the hawk's flight paths apart. He would look for another way, so he asked him to be careful. Prince Kelsey. The sky that day was clear, the sunlight bright and warm. Nivea Herback had hunting gear slung over her shoulder, and she was drenched in sweat. She glanced around, then thought gloomily, "Why isn't he here yet?" As she looked around, she suddenly spotted someone. The figure seemed familiar. Startled, she called out loudly, "Phil." He was sitting on horseback, looking remarkably handsome. Herback happily asked, "I thought you weren't coming." Phil immediately glanced down at her. Then he replied, "No one lives long if they go around committing crimes everywhere." Hearing those words, Herback's cheerful mood instantly turned slightly prickly. She quickly protested, saying, "Excuse me, but I've never done anything illegal." Then she firmly insisted, "I'm a model citizen. I'm not a criminal." At that, Phil quickly asked in return, "So are you saying everyone from the temple is a criminal?" The question seemed to fluster her back. She avoided his gaze and answered awkwardly, "No, but if you look at it another way, they're the bad guys." Then she immediately placed a hand over her chest and said clearly and seriously, "Anyway, I keep ending up indebted to you, but I swear I haven't committed any sins." Hearing that, Phil suddenly paused, glanced at her once, and then gently held out his hand, saying, "Get on." Seeing that, her back quickly put away the things she was carrying. Then she smiled and lightly placed her hand in his. Her back nimbly climbed onto the horse. She smiled as she settled herself neatly in front. Watching her get onto the horse by herself, Phil was surprised and let out an impressed sound. Then he praised her back, saying, "You've got good physical aptitude." Hearing that, she smiled smugly and said, "Of course. You should hurry up and teach me those swishy sword moves." Hearing that, Phil simply sat in silence and looked at the road without replying. He quickly pulled the reins and set the horse moving. Her back sat shyly in front, smiling as she thought to herself, this is actually pretty comfortable. Then the two of them leisurely continued on their way. But life is never like a dream. After traveling for a while, they stopped to rest. Her back grimaced as she held her aching back and complained, "Oh my gosh, my back." Right after that, she did a few stretches. She slowly placed one foot at a time on a rock to stretch her muscles. As she did, she sighed, "My legs are so stiff." Phil, who was standing beside her, looked confused. He asked what those strange movements she was doing were. Hearing him, her back glanced over and said, "Oh, this? How should I explain it?" Then she sprang up, stretched out her arms, twisted her body, and cheerfully explained, "I'm stretching my muscles to make my body more flexible." Although her back hurt, she still looked bright and full of energy. Phil stood beside her, holding his chin in thought, then said, "I've heard monks teach something similar." Her back continued stretching and added, "My muscles are going to be sore tomorrow, so I'm warming them up to prevent that." Suddenly, Phil held out a piece of bread and told her to eat. Her back half-jokingly asked, "Is this for display?" She probably asked that because the bread looked like the kind restaurants put out in front to advertise. Hearing her say that, Phil said in a slightly sulky tone, "If you don't want it, give it back." Her back frowned and quickly replied, "Who said I wasn't eating it?" She immediately took her first bite, and she seemed surprised by the taste. Startled, she thought, it's better than I expected." Then she quietly said to Phil, "Oh, not bad." After that, she turned and saw Phil holding a flask and drinking from it. Curious, she asked, "What's that? Give me some too." Hearing that, Phil, who was taking a drink, quickly pointed to the water skin and said, "That one is for you." After seeing the water skin, her back turned back to look at Phil and asked suspiciously, "What are you holding? It looks like alcohol." He calmly replied with just 2 words, "A drink." After drinking water and eating bread, he quickly turned to her back and said, "Let's keep going." Hearing that, her back cried out in shock, "What?" She dragged herself toward Phil and complained, "Sir Knight, please, let's stop and rest a little." Hearing that, Phil only turned to her coldly and said, "We have to hurry. Once the sun sets behind the mountains, we won't be able to continue." Hearing that, she realized he was right, then carefully asked his opinion. "Can I go over there and wash my face?" "There's enough time, right?" Phil quickly replied. "Go and come back quickly." While her back went to wash her face, Phil sat on the horse with his arms crossed, deep in thought as he calculated things. Will we have enough provisions to get there? Stopping at Avio would be rather inconvenient. But as he thought that far, he paused slightly, and his expression suddenly became more serious. With sharp eyes fixed ahead, he realized that, just as expected, House Herback was supporting the Duke's faction. He thought about Herback's background. She was Nivea Herback, 19 years old, the eldest daughter of House Herback, a family with 1 son and 2 daughters. The strange thing was that her older brother was the son of her stepmother, the countess who remarried into the family later. In addition, after being chosen as a candidate for the position of Saintess, she had moved into the temple several years ago. She was said to have a calm and quiet personality. Thinking that far, he suddenly felt something was off. Tilting his head, he wondered, calm and quiet? He thought further about her back. She was supposed to have always been under surveillance and had not completely cut off contact with her family. She also paid close attention to the Duke's actions. At that point, he became pensive again. "I know her identity, while she knows nothing about mine." He glanced over and continued thinking. Judging from the present situation, she hardly knows anything about the world she's living in. It was almost as if she had come from another world. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that the two of them were completely different, like opposite extremes. Then suddenly, a scream rang out, startling him. He hurriedly turned to look behind him. With his sword ready in hand, he immediately ran over and asked in alarm, "What happened?" Her back looked frightened and anxious as she said, "Over there." Sure enough, a large monster with a green body suddenly appeared, its sharp teeth bared and its savage eyes staring straight at Phil and Herback. It kept making hissing noises. Since it was Herback's first time seeing such a thing, she was extremely frightened. Her mouth fell open as she turned and shouted to Phil, "Sir Knight, what is that thing appearing before my holy eyes?" In contrast to Herback's agitation, Phil was extremely calm and simply asked, "Is there a pack nearby?" Then he calmly explained to Herback, "That's a mountain goblin." But because she was terrified, she only screamed, "Do I look like I care whether it's a mountain goblin or a sea goblin? Get rid of it already." Phil immediately drew his sword and said, "Take out the dagger I gave you yesterday." Hearing that from beside him, Herback turned to look at the slimy green goblin, grimaced, and said, "Don't tell me you want me to kill that disgusting thing." Phil calmly replied, "You can't protect yourself if you can't kill a goblin." Hearing Phil say that, her attitude suddenly changed completely. Holding the dagger in her hand, she burned with fighting spirit and said, "Fine, let's do it." Killing it is no different from slaughtering a chicken or duck. Just then, the giant monster in front of her growled, making horrifying noises that made her do nothing but scream. "What the hell am I supposed to do?" Phil immediately shouted instructions from behind her. "Lower your center of gravity as much as possible. Goblins aren't aggressive." But before Phil could finish speaking, she was already smugly swinging the dagger and saying in delight, "It's just a low-level demon? Then this'll be easy." Seeing that from behind, Phil hurriedly shouted one more sentence, "Wait, they're quite agile." Meanwhile, Herback was already face-to-face with the goblin. She swung the dagger with all her strength, then cried out in horror, "What in creation is this?" She became terrified, stepped back, and said, "I thought it was just a mutated salamander." At that moment, the goblin gradually attacked her. It raised its sharp claws, clenched its teeth, and stared at her with a horrifying gaze. Facing that dangerous situation, Herback was extremely frightened. Then the goblin suddenly grabbed her hair. That action left both Herback and Phil shocked and panicked. After the goblin grabbed her hair, strands of it began to come loose one after another. Her hair scattered everywhere. At that moment, the hideous goblin's green hand was gripping her hair tightly. Because it happened so quickly, both he and she were caught off guard. Just as he gripped the hilt of his sword and was about to draw it to save her, she moved faster. She used the dagger to slice off the clump of hair. Then, holding the dagger, she stabbed it straight into the goblin's neck. She wiped the sweat from her forehead with her hand. Phil, dying to a low-level monster would be humiliating. He looked at her in surprise and thought pensively. Although goblins are low-level monsters, they still belong to a monster species. Monster hunting is part of the test for low-ranking knights who have undergone training. But for a noble young lady to kill one so easily is rather surprising. Standing opposite him, she told him, "Let's go." He asked with concern, "Are you all right?" Her face looked slightly dissatisfied. "What would you do if I said no? You should have come to help the moment someone called for help." His gaze lowered to her slightly trembling arm as she put away the dagger. Then he sighed, as if he had realized something. He comforted her, saying, "Monsters always harm humans, so don't think of it as killing someone." She immediately denied it. "I won't," he continued explaining. "If you don't kill it, someone else will, or will kill some traveler." She also said, "I feel less guilty now." After saying that, she thought to herself, "It's like killing a mosquito or swatting a fly, but I have to get used to it. Until I find a way, I have to survive first." Her hand clenched tightly into a fist, trembling as well. "Because if I die, it's over." After that thought, she changed the topic and spoke to him. "Please train me before making me do it in actual combat." He agreed and said, "All right." Dusk gradually fell. He suggested, "Let's camp here tonight." She agreed with him. Okay. Night covered the entire sky. At that moment, she sat leaning against a tree, facing the flickering fire, so hungry that her cheeks seemed hollow. Meanwhile, he was sitting there skewering pieces of meat, his face extremely focused. Seeing that he had finished one skewer and held it over the fire to roast, she asked curiously, "Sir Knight, where did you learn this kind of thing?" He answered her question as well. "I learned by watching others do it. It's nothing special." She was so hungry that drool nearly ran down her chin. Her smiling face seemed deeply satisfied. "Ooh, that rabbit meat looks delicious." He held out a cooked skewer in front of her. She asked shyly, "What about you?" He replied, "I have mine." Right after hearing him say that, she took the meat skewer and started devouring it. As she ate, she praised it, saying, "This is ridiculously good. Hearing her, he looked confused. You use strange words a lot. Is that language used in the temple? Hearing him say that, she stammered slightly. Oh no, they're just words that unconsciously pop out. Like things you say when you're surprised. He continued asking, what does it mean? Holding up the meat skewer in her hand, she explained, well, it's something I use to describe delicious food. It has a very positive meaning. Hearing that, he continued skewering meat while looking as if he understood. Is that so? She chewed the meat in her mouth and thought, it is good, but as soon as she thought that, she put her hand into her bag and rummaged around for something. Then she took out 2 small bottles from inside. There they are. Before he could eat, he saw her hold out her hand in front of him. Give that to me for a moment. When he obediently handed the meat skewer to her, he saw her sprinkle some kind of powder onto the meat. After finishing, she handed it back to him. Done. Try it. He took it, but inwardly looked at the meat in puzzlement. However, her eyes were wide and sparkling. Seeing her look at him like that, he took a bite. Then his eyes widened, his face filled with surprise. It was as if a bolt of lightning ran through his mind. This meat, how can she create a flavor like this? She asked his opinion. It's edible, right? Not bad, is it? At that moment, he was enthusiastically gnawing on the meat, completely forgetting everything around him. The richness was not too greasy. With every bite, meat juices burst out and wrapped around his taste buds, followed by the delicious texture of the meat. She looked at him with interest. Earth to satellite. Do you read me? It's good, right? His face darkened, and his body trembled slightly. Although he was somewhat embarrassed, he still had to admit it. It's ridiculously good. Hearing that, she smiled brightly like a flower. MSG is ridiculously good. The fire was still burning. She lay on her back and looked up at the sky, seemingly troubled. Her eyes were a little sad as she thought, right now, I'm traveling with Sir Knight to Avio, where that heartless family is, and I still don't have a concrete plan. Tonight's sky was full of stars, breathtakingly beautiful, but she still paid no attention to it and only kept circling around the thoughts in her head. Will this plan to avoid disappearing really succeed? Remembering the shapes of those bizarre monsters, she thought, I have to avoid being killed by monsters and also the war that's about to happen. Her eyes were filled with worries. I don't have the power to stop the war from happening, so all I can do is quit being the Saintess. But in the novel, the person God chooses will still be Nivea Herback. Thinking about those things, she tiredly closed her eyes and sighed. He gently asked, Can't sleep? Hearing that, she opened her eyes. Looking over, she saw that he was still awake too. You can't sleep either? He glanced up at the sky. Tonight is a little bright. She thought in confusion, what nonsense is he talking about? It's pitch black. I can't see a thing. As soon as she thought that, she was so surprised that her eyes widened. At that moment, thousands upon tens of thousands of stars in the night sky were all shining beautifully. She was so amazed that she said, wow. At that moment, both he and she were looking up at the sky together. The scene was incredibly romantic. She was so delighted that she exclaimed, It's so beautiful. Under the clear sky, her back was sleeping soundly and snoring when Phil suddenly called out loudly. Wake up. Dazed, she mumbled, just 5 more minutes. Hearing that, Phil threatened, If you're not up in 5 seconds, you can sleep there by yourself. Herback immediately opened her eyes wide and shouted angrily, Don't you dare leave me behind. With that, she sprang up. Still yawning, she stretched her body. Phil glanced at her and urged, If you're awake, get ready to go. A pot of delicious food was boiling away. Seeing that, Herback was stunned. While wiping her hair, she asked, What are you making? Phil answered coldly, Stew. Curious, Herback moved closer and looked into the pot. She was unexpectedly surprised when she saw the fragrant, delicious-looking food. Then she exclaimed with shining eyes, Oh, there's even meat. Phil was sitting beside the pot, stirring the meat, and said to her, There were some scraps left from last night, so I chopped them up and put them in. Phil quickly handed the spoon in his hand over to Herback. She took the spoon and eagerly tasted the dish. After the first bite, she thought it would be better if it were seasoned properly. Once she thought that, she immediately tied her hair up neatly while smiling to herself. I'll turn him into an MSG addict. Then she quickly adjusted the seasoning of the dish. Sitting beside her, Phil saw that Herback seemed skilled at it, and he asked in admiration and surprise, How do you know how much seasoning is enough? Meanwhile, Herback happily and confidently sprinkled more spices into the pot and answered casually, Huh? Why measure it? Listen to the message from the universe. No, just feeling it is enough. Hearing that, he could only raise his head to look at her and ask, Is your dream to become a chef? Herback immediately looked up and told him, I moved out and lived alone for 10 no. At that point, she suddenly realized something was wrong, hesitated and thought, then corrected herself. I lived alone for quite a long time, so I had to learn how to cook this and that. It ended up becoming a hobby. After saying that, she continued adjusting the seasoning. A while later, she scooped some into a small bowl and handed it to Phil. She said to him, "Here, try it." Hearing that, Phil quickly reached out and accepted the bowl. He immediately scooped up a bite and tried it. Then, all of a sudden, he set the spoon down with a clack. Seeing his reaction from where she sat beside him, Nivea grew flustered and thought, "Oh no, I must have overseasoned it. I wanted to get him a little hooked, but I made it twice as strong as yesterday." She awkwardly asked, "Does it not suit your taste?" However, she never could have expected that after putting the spoon down, Phil would immediately pick up the entire bowl and gulp it down. She was truly astonished and hurriedly cried out, "Wait, it's hot. You'll burn your mouth." Phil ignored her and hurriedly ate the bowl of soup. After draining the bowl, he wiped the corner of his mouth with his hand and tearfully praised it. "Delicious. Super amazing. Delicious on an even higher level." Hearing that praise, Nivea could not hold back and burst into laughter. As she laughed happily, she said, "You should say mind-blowingly delicious instead." Mind-blowingly? Oh, right, like a bomb exploding and bursting into flames. Mind-blowingly delicious. After hearing that, Phil, sitting beside her, absorbed it completely. He nodded seriously and said, "Oh, I will remember it. Mind-blowingly delicious." In the blink of an eye, the fourth day of their journey arrived. That day, Nivea was diligently practicing the movements needed to use a dagger skillfully. She trained seriously and diligently. Phil stood beside her and watched, carefully correcting each of her movements. He gently instructed her to keep her arm close to her body and maintain that stance so the tip of the blade would always be aimed at the opponent. After saying that, he devotedly demonstrated the movements for her to learn from. He explained in detail, "You cannot just swing a dagger around wildly. You have to use it to deliver a fatal stab." After watching Phil's instruction, Nivea quickly understood and immediately practiced for him to see, her eyes filled with determination. Standing beside her, Phil was surprised as well. Inwardly, he exclaimed, "She really learns fast." The two of them continued training together until the sun gradually set. Phil was searching intently through his bag, then took something out. Right away, he held a large piece of meat out in front of Nivea and said, "Here." Sitting there, Nivea brightened with excitement and said, "Oh, awesome." Immediately after that, they quickly prepared the meat. The unprocessed piece of meat was soon sizzling over the fire. Nivea said cheerfully, "Sometimes the best way to cook is to bring the flavor of nature into each ingredient." Then she very professionally sprinkled a little salt and pepper over the meat, looking like a real chef. Phil, sitting beside her, could only marvel and watch with admiration in his eyes. Nivea stared intently at the meat, then thought, timing when to flip the meat is also very important. That way, the meat would still be juicy. As soon as she thought that, she timed it perfectly and flipped the meat over. Turned at just the right moment, the meat looked golden and incredibly appetizing. Watching from the side, Phil could not help drooling because of the aroma drifting out. Nivea glanced over at Phil and smiled, thinking with a rather proud expression, "I told him I was a great cook, but he didn't believe me." She quickly cut the slab of meat into bite-sized pieces. The glossy meat, along with the fragrant aroma rising from it, looked incredibly tempting. Then Nivea said excitedly, "Let's dig in." The two of them happily enjoyed the fruits of their labor. The very first bite was enough to make them both exclaim in admiration, immersed in the flavor of the stone-grilled meat. After that, they happily enjoyed the meal together. The scene shifted. It was now time to rest after a long day. Nivea quickly lay down, and while pulling the blanket over herself, she grimaced and complained, "Good grief, my old joints." After saying that, she closed her eyes, sighed, and murmured, "Ah, I want to soak them in hot water." Phil, sitting beside her, heard her say that and quickly asked, "The meat?" Nivea replied, "No, my precious body." After that, Nivea lay there smiling and winked as she glanced toward Phil. She thought very smugly, "Haha, I've already conquered his stomach." At that moment, Phil was leaning back against a tree. Looking at her, he informed her, "Tomorrow, we will arrive at a small village." Hearing that as she lay there, Nivea sprang up excitedly. With her eyes shining brightly, she asked, "Really?" She happily added, "Finally, a village where we can rest." Phil sat in thought by the tree and quietly answered, I plan to stop there to confirm our direction and replenish our necessities. Hearing that, Nivea asked further, by the way, Sir Knight, where are you planning to go? Phil propped an arm on his knee in contemplation and said, I am on my way to Adam. Immediately, Nivea turned to him in surprise and said, Huh? Adam? Phil quickly explained, it is not very far from Avio, so there are quite a few rest stops between them. Nivea listened and simply replied, I see. I'm terrible at geography. Phil gently said, It's all right. By then, night had truly fallen. Everything was submerged in darkness. Nivea lay down and fell into a deep sleep. Phil, on the other hand, had far too many things to think about. He still sat cross-armed in thought beside the tree. He looked toward Nivea with doubt and curiosity, then asked himself, how could she not know Adam? She is the eldest daughter of House Herback. Thinking that far, he closed his eyes and sighed. Then he told himself that he would find out soon enough. And so, the dark night passed quietly. The next morning, while Nivea was still sleeping soundly, Phil called out, Wake up. Still half asleep, she mumbled, Then she sat up, covered her mouth, and let out a big yawn. In a sleepy voice, she asked, Has the rooster crowed yet? I still haven't slept enough. Then suddenly, Phil leaned in close to her and glanced to the side as a signal. Shoo! Nivea, who had been yawning, suddenly became startled and alarmed. After that, Phil quickly said, I can sense a presence nearby. Immediately, the two of them quickly rose in perfect coordination, weapons ready in hand, and carefully looked around with serious caution. At the meeting hall of Heron Village, Nivea asked the villagers, You're saying the children were all kidnapped at once? A villager replied, We do not know what is happening. Monsters suddenly appeared in front of the village, so we evacuated the children and went to investigate. Nivea asked worriedly, Then have you found any monsters? One old man among the villagers spoke up. There were no monsters. The night watchman that night saw a black group, but because it was the middle of the night, he was not certain. The man being mentioned stood up and said, I was the one on guard that night. I swear I saw them with my own eyes. Nivea asked, But you cannot confirm whether they were demons or not. Is that right? He answered at once, Yes. Please help us, Sir Knight. There is no one in this village who can properly wield a sword. One woman among the villagers cried for a child. The old man from before continued, This village has little to offer. Because of the recent monsters and bandits, even the regular travelers have stopped coming here. They pleaded earnestly, Please help us find the children. Sir Knight, please help us. At that moment, Nivea turned to Phil and said, Sir Knight, I will stay here to help them. Phil nodded, but inwardly he thought, there is no reason for her to do that. Nivea explained, I know that we would have passed by if we had not known about this. But if we know and still ignore it, then we are no different from the monsters out there. One of the women stepped forward and took Nivea's hand. With tears falling, she thanked her. Nivea turned to Phil and said, I'm not in much of a hurry either, but I know you still have things to do, so I will not force you to stay long. Phil looked at Nivea, then looked toward the villagers and let out a sigh. 2 days. In any case, I plan to rest here, so I will help you search for the people for these 2 days. Hearing Phil say that, the old man nodded repeatedly and thanked him. Phil then turned to ask him, Do you have a map of the area around the village? The old man replied, Because this is a small village, we do not have a map. Phil continued, Then find a person who knows the area around here best, and have them draw me a basic map quickly. I also want you to show me where the children disappeared. After everyone left, Nivea's expression became strange. I can't believe I'm in Heron Village. That thing is in this village. Wait, I should raise their trust in me by helping them first. Nivea was thinking about Phil. He is a reliable ally. At that moment, Phil went with the old man to the storage shed. This is where the children disappeared. Sir, Phil asked, You hid the children here? The old man answered yes. Phil bent down, touched the ground with his hand, and said, It seems a monster really did appear here. Hearing Phil say that, everyone in the village was extremely shocked and frightened. Nivea had arrived, and she was looking inside. Phil continued, But it is a little strange. There are no bloodstains, which means no one was injured. At least, not here. Nivea fell into thought. Oh, that means the children may still be alive. Phil nodded. That is right. Judging by the footprints, it was not a pack of monsters. There was only one. It was not large either. There is a high chance the children were frightened and scattered. Hearing Phil say that, the villagers felt somewhat relieved. Nivea said that the children were still safe. Suddenly, one man among the villagers shouted, "What makes you think you can find them?" Nivea was startled by the shout and turned her gaze toward him. He was the villager Akman. With his arms crossed in front of him, he firmly declared that there was a whole pack of dangerous monsters in the village, and that all of them would die if they tried to search for those children. He continued, asking everyone, "Can any of you hunt an orc?" "And it is not just one. There is an entire pack," Nivea replied. "According to the knight, there is only one small monster, and it is not large." He shouted back loudly, "I said there is a huge one out there." After being yelled at so loudly, Nivea finally lost her patience. She angrily said to him, "Hey, do you enjoy rubbing salt in other people's wounds just because your own child did not go missing?" He still tried to pick a fight. Pointing at Nivea's face, he said, "What did you say? Say that again if you dare. You are the one who does not understand what you are saying. My son went missing too." After hearing what he said, Nivea asked in astonishment, "You too?" One woman among the villagers answered her, "That's right, young lady. His son was with the other children too." Nivea fell silent for a long while, then looked at Akman with a suspicious gaze. "What are you scheming?" He flinched and asked, "What did you say?" Nivea said with suspicion, "Your son disappeared too." "Then why are you not like the other parents, rushing around to find your child?" His expression became anxious as he asked back, "What now? Do you know what you were saying?" "It is indeed sad that the children disappeared because of monsters, but the lives of the villagers, who are like family, in this village are just as important." Nivea fell silent. Outside, many people gathered. "Sir Knight, we have finished drawing the map." Phil stepped out from inside and said, "I am over here." Phil asked the villagers, "Have you checked the caves?" One man then said, "Yes, sir. There was not even a single rat." While searching all over the mountain and the caves, we met two people. Looking at the map, Phil pondered, Then he said to everyone there, "You must be aware of how dangerous this is. The volunteers who go to search for the missing people must know how to protect themselves." A tall, strong man immediately stood in front of Nivea and showed off. "Only those who can protect themselves should." Before he could finish speaking, she cut him off. "That is for other people to hear." This left him confused. Then she said smugly, "I heard him say he would take people who were aware of the danger of the search. As for me," Nivea's words made him angry, and he shouted, "What can a girl like you do if you run into danger? You will be more useful searching inside the village." Hearing that, her face darkened, and she answered coldly, "If you lose your life, then do not blame us for not helping." Her attitude made him somewhat irritated. "Who do you think you are, acting so high and mighty?" Without saying much, she drew her dagger. "And you keep interrupting people like that. I have already put up with you long enough." Seeing the dagger, his face went pale. After that, she pointed the blade straight at his neck. Nivea asked coldly, "It seems your hands have a rather bad habit, don't they?" "My hands also tend to have habits of their own. Want to try them?" As for Phil, he looked at the map in his hand and asked the villagers, "Is there anything near the stream?" Everyone said, "There are many bushes around there, as well as natural caves here and there." Malin stepped forward with an axe, wanting to help with the search. "I will help search too." Phil nodded, indicating his agreement. In the dark forest, only the light of the torches in everyone's hands appeared. Looking at everything around them, Phil came up with an idea. Split into groups of 4 and search. After that, everyone divided into groups. While Nivea's group was walking, she suddenly heard something and asked everyone, "Did you hear that?" The man spoke up, "What nonsense are you talking about? Stop saying useless things and keep searching. It's to the right." However, Nivea felt that the left side was correct. "No, it is to the left. I'm sure it is by those bushes." At that moment, she had a guess in her heart. "Don't tell me." Then she said to Malin, "Malin, I heard the children's voices over there." Hearing that, the woman grew worried too. "Then we have to go there quickly." But that man seemed to be hiding something. He stood in front of the two of them, blocking them. I said there is nothing there. Going that way is a mistake. Nivea did not agree and answered angrily, "Then we can just go there and check." "How do you know there is nothing there when you have not checked?" Her words made him stammer fearfully, not knowing how to lie. "What are you talking about?" "Put the knife away first." Nivea asked sternly, "You know what is over there, don't you?" But he still tried to deny it. "I do not know." Nivea did not let him off and angrily asked again, "I will not ask a second time. Tell me what is over there before a few holes appear in your body." Nivea pressed the knife against Akman's neck, drawing blood and frightening him. With a face burning with rage, she said, "Do I look like I am joking with you?" Nivea continued holding the knife to Akman's neck as she threatened him. "There is no one here who can stop me. Aunt Malin, check that place." At that moment, Akman's face was covered in sweat, and he trembled in fear. Nivea glanced toward the bushes and said, "Over there, in those bushes." Hearing her say that, he shouted in panic, "No, you can't." Nivea shouted angrily, "Shut your mouth." Malin trembled and raised the rake she was holding in her hands as she approached the nearby bushes. She slowly pushed the bushes aside. Suddenly, a figure appeared, sitting hidden behind them. At that moment, the image of a little boy with tears in his eyes was clearly revealed as he called out, "Auntie!" The little boy ran over and hugged Malin, and she burst into tears. "Oh God, you're safe." Seeing that, Ackman dropped to his knees and cried out in despair, "No, no." Phil thought inwardly, just as expected. Meanwhile, Nivea stood nearby, frowning in confusion. Nivea approached Malin and asked, "Is he a child from the village?" Kneeling down and crying as she hugged Anton, Malin replied, "Yes, yes, he is. Solby. Anton, I'm so glad you're all right." Tears streamed down her face as she asked her nephew, "What about the others? Where are they?" The little boy, tears pouring down his face, did not answer her and called Dad. Anton then turned and ran toward Ackman and Nivea. "Dad!" The little boy hugged Ackman and cried as he said, "Dad, Solby, I am sorry. I remembered you told me to stay quiet and remain here. Solby." The boy grew more and more pitiful as he continued, but it was dark, scary, and cold. Nivea looked at him in shock and asked, "You hid your own child? Where are the others?" Tears also fell from Ackman's eyes as he explained, "I had no other choice. Solby, I truly never wanted to do this." Malin led the little boy, Anton, out of there, leaving Ackman behind. He was kneeling on the ground, repeatedly wiping away his tears, but he still could not stop crying. Seeing that he was being annoying by crying so much, Nivea shouted, "Stop crying already. You are a grown man. Crying like that will not erase your sins." Ackman pressed his lips together, trembling. She urged him to confess quickly before it was too late. Ackman wiped his tears and replied, "I only wanted to protect my son." She immediately clenched her fists, frowned, and scolded him. "Save your excuses for after we find the children. Where are they?" Ackman slowly explained everything to Nivea. After Nivea heard him out, she was horrified and shocked. Ackman then recalled the scene. He had shielded his son behind him when two knife-wielding bandits threatened him and his child. The bandits threatened to kill both me and my son if I refused to help them. Ackman lowered his head and thought, so I had to choose. He stood in silence before the door for a moment. Either both of us died there. I handed the village children over to them. Ackman opened the door and shouted loudly, startling the children. "Monsters have stormed into the village. Run to the mountain. Hurry, follow me." Those children were captured by the bandits. They screamed and called out to Ackman, but Ackman did not turn back. Biting his lip, he glanced at them with guilt. I led the children into the mountains, hid Anton in the bushes, and handed all the others over to the bandits. When it was over, I planned to take my son and run away. When Malin heard Ackman's confession, she broke down and burst into tears. The man holding the torch and Nivea both grimaced in horror and shock. Ackman clutched his head again and again in remorse. "I am sorry. I am sorry. I am truly sorry." Nivea quickly pointed and ordered, "Malin, take the boy and call Sir Knight's group here at once." She sped off at a run, drenched in sweat and panting heavily. She thought to herself that she had to get there before sunrise. Nivea frowned in thought. If she kept waiting for Sir Knight's group to arrive, it would be too late. Nivea rose onto her toes, gathering momentum to jump. Gritting her teeth, Nivea struggled to launch herself down from above. One of Nivea's hands hit the ground, while both her legs collapsed beneath her. Exhausted, she thought, "May the Lord bless my stamina." She had arrived. She hid behind a bush and peered out, watching every movement of the bandits nearby. Nivea frowned and thought, "Fewer than I expected." Nivea pondered it. Rather than suffer losses while occupying a village, they would rather kidnap children easily by threatening one coward. The bandits stood around the carriage with torches, laughing loudly. 3 children sat on the carriage with their hands tied, crying pitifully without stop. Nivea gritted her teeth and cursed inwardly. Those inhuman bastards. She took the bow and arrows from her back. The distance is about 40 meters. Holding the bow, Nivea calculated the distance needed to hit her target. In competitions, the target distance was usually 90 meters. So this range was nothing. The important thing was that she only had one chance. The bandits were preparing to drive away the horse carrying the children. Nivea saw that the time had come and whispered. She gripped her bow and readied herself. Nivea was ready, in the most precise stance, to land her shot. Her gaze sharpened as she stared straight at her target. Nivea, felt as though she had returned to the time when she had once won medals in archery. She aimed her bow at the horse's leg, imagining an archery target. She calculated the distance as precisely as possible. The diameter of the 10-point ring was 8 centimeters, and that of the inner 10 was 4 centimeters. Nivea smiled. The number of arrows given to each athlete was 36. Nivea smiled brightly as she wore the gold medal of the championship. At the moment I won that gold medal, how many 10s did I score with those 36 arrows? After measuring the distance and fixing her aim, Nivea released the bowstring. The sharp arrow swiftly flew straight forward. The answer was all of them. Blood splattered everywhere. The arrow pierced straight through the horse's leg. In pain, it reared and neighed, kicking the man beside it and making him stagger unsteadily. After hitting her mark, Nivea stood proudly and thought with satisfaction, 36. Nivea Herback slowly drew another arrow and prepared to shoot again. Suddenly, the sound of a horse galloping toward her made her flinch and freeze. It turned out to be Phil, riding in on his warhorse. The splendid sight left Nivea Herback stunned and speechless. Phil began galloping toward the enemies, sword in hand, advancing heroically. At that moment, Nivea Herback lowered her bow and stared blankly at the scene. As for the kidnappers, they screamed in terror while their blood splattered everywhere. After a while, she finally snapped out of her daze and realized how chaotic the scene before her was. Her face instantly turned pale. She vomited up everything she had eaten that evening. After dealing with the kidnappers, Phil slowly walked toward Nivea Herback and silently watched as she continued to throw up. He came closer and rubbed her back to help calm her down. With his handsome face, cold demeanor, and a bit of ketchup-like blood on his cheek, Phil said calmly to Nivea Herback, "This is not something you can get used to, nor is it easy to become accustomed to it." Nivea Herback immediately gave him a weary look, waved him away, and replied, "Huh? What are you talking about? I thought I was going to meet the Lord after running all the way here. I was too busy running, and now I feel like all my insides are tangled up." Phil replied helplessly, "So that was it." Nivea Herback pouted in annoyance and said, "Someone was lucky enough to get here easily on horseback, while someone else was panting like a dog after running here on her own 2 legs. Because that person doesn't have a horse." Phil was helpless against her stubbornness. "If you want, I can teach you how to ride." Nivea Herback continued making an annoyed face and complained, Forget it. I don't have a horse anyway. It's not like I own one. Never mind what I just said." Phil, helpless before her obstinacy, replied, "I can lend you Philip." Nivea Herback continued looking displeased and said, "Forget it. I only like traveling on my own 2 feet." Though she was acting annoyed at Phil, in truth, her current mood was one of deep embarrassment. Inwardly, she thought, "Ugh, I'm so embarrassed I could die. I don't usually throw up like that, unless I overexert myself like today, or when I'm shocked." After Nivea Herback regained her composure, she said awkwardly to Phil, "Hey, I'm hungry." Seeing that Nivea Herback had returned to her usual self, Phil's stern expression softened, and a faint smile appeared on his face. He replied, "Let's go." At the village gate, a scene of happiness erupted as each household reunited with its children. Joy filled the place, mingling with tears of relief. "Oh, my daughter, you're safe. Dad, Mom." Seeing this happy scene made both Nivea Herback and Phil feel glad for them. Meanwhile, the village chief was punishing the villagers who had colluded with the kidnappers. "What you did was wicked and unforgivable." He ordered them to leave and never set foot here again. The father and son kept crying as they realized the grave sin they had committed. All they could do was apologize desperately, over and over, trying to make up for their mistake even though they knew they never could. Seeing that scene, Nivea Herback stopped. Then suddenly, one of the parents who had been helped approached her. "Sir Knight, young lady, thank you both so much." Nivea Herback also replied happily, "It's truly fortunate that all the children are safe." Seeing that the 2 of them seemed not to have eaten anything, Malin insisted on inviting them to have dinner at her home. At Malin's house, the meal was only a simple one by ordinary villager standards, but it made Nivea Herback extremely hungry. Seeing that, Malin replied shyly, "It isn't much, but I hope it suits your taste." Nivea Herback immediately ate like a starving beast and thought to herself, "Home-cooked food is the best. It's even better when someone else cooks it for you." A while later, after finishing the hearty dinner, Nivea Herback, with her stomach full and round, fell asleep right there in her chair in perfect comfort. Malin approached and woke her up while drool still trailed from Nivea's mouth. nearly destroying her image completely. Seeing Nivea Herback's disheveled appearance, Malin found a set of clothes and handed it to her. Here you are. These belong to a woman in the village. They've been washed clean, and she's about the same height as you, so they should fit. Nivea Herback replied awkwardly, "Ah, yes. Thank you, ma'am." She thought in embarrassment, "It's good to have clean clothes to wear, but my whole body feels so sticky. After rolling around out in the world for so many days, I really wanted to take a proper bath once we reached the village." Seeing Nivea Herback's messy hair from not having bathed in days made Aunt Malin sigh helplessly. Then Aunt Malin handed Nivea Herback a bar of soap. The moment Nivea Herback saw the bar of soap, her eyes suddenly lit up and she cried out, "A holy bar of soap." Aunt Malin continued cheerfully, "We have a bathhouse for female guests passing through here. There's also a tub filled with hot water ready for you and Sir Knight." Hearing that made Nivea Herback even more excited, her face brightening at once. Nivea Herback flattered her enthusiastically. "Wow, thank you so much, beautiful, gentle, kind Aunt Malin. I really want to take a bath right away." Seeing that, Aunt Malin also replied happily, "Is that so? Hurry along, then. He is waiting for you." Before she could hear the full sentence, Nivea Herback had already run straight toward the hot bath. Thinking of what was about to happen, Aunt Malin blushed and sighed. Goodness, young love certainly is energetic. At that moment, Nivea Herback walked along while imagining the blissful feeling of soaking in the bath. She did not realize that she had just missed one very important detail. All she vaguely remembered was, what did Aunt Malin just say? He's waiting for me. Oh, Sir Knight really is the perfect gentleman. He must be letting me soak first. Under that misunderstanding, Nivea Herback reached the bath. She opened the door and stepped inside. Excited to finally enjoy the hot bath, she immediately realized the truth when she saw Phil's naked body, every muscle exposed, inside the bathroom. Phil, who was wearing nothing at all, also saw her at that moment. Their eyes met in an extremely awkward situation. But because she had just eaten her fill and then rushed all the way here, Nivea Herback immediately started feeling nauseous. She ran out of there at once to find a place to throw up. Seeing that, Phil began to misunderstand, and he suffered another psychological trauma. Once again, Malin was humming a tune, working in high spirits. Suddenly, Malin turned around and screamed, "Good heavens, a ghost!" Nivea Herback had appeared, panting heavily while clutching a fresh set of clothes. Malin, startled out of her wits, questioned her urgently. "Young lady, what happened to you?" Sweat poured from Nivea Herback, and she could not say a word. With the hand that was not holding the clothes, she pointed toward the bathhouse. Malin, holding a hoe in one hand, stammered, "What? What is it? What's in the bathhouse?" Nivea Herback froze and stared at the hoe in Malin's hand. A realization flashed through Nivea Herback's eyes. It was the pitchfork of that rotten night. Then Nivea Herback suddenly bent over and let out a retching sound, terrifying Malin. Malin still did not understand what had happened and could only say blankly, "Young lady." Then Malin finally reacted, handed her some water, and said with concern, "Here's some water." Nivea Herback hurriedly took the glass and gulped it down, leaving Malin unsure how to react. Nivea Herback quickly wiped the sweat from her face and said while panting, Auntie, I just went to the bathhouse you pointed me to, and that rotten Sir Knight, is..." Before she could finish speaking, Malin blushed awkwardly and asked, "Oh my lord, don't tell me the two of you are dating." The question made Nivea Herback freeze completely, not knowing how to react. All she could utter was, Malin said cheerfully, "Oh my, I thought you two had that kind of relationship." As soon as Malin finished speaking, Nivea Herback's face turned as red as if it might bleed. Combined with her red hair, her entire face looked like it was on fire. At that moment, Nivea Herback screamed in desperation, "What?" Then Malin covered her face with one hand and held the hoe in the other, realizing that she had misunderstood. She could only try to explain herself. "Oh dear, I'm sorry. I thought you two were a couple who had run away together or something. I couldn't think of any other reason why a man and a woman would be traveling together." Nivea Herback could only sigh in exasperation. As soon as she finished speaking, Malin spun around and ran off. Only her guilty shout echoed back, "I'll prepare another bath for you. Please wait a moment, young lady." A while later, Nivea Herback dipped one foot into the bath, then gradually relaxed her entire body in the warm water. She let out a deeply satisfied sigh. This feels amazing." After that, Nivea Herback suddenly looked down at her own hands and thought, 2 weeks have already passed since I transmigrated into this body. Then Nivea Herback remembered images of High Priestess Rosanna and Duke Ethios and thought to herself, to stay away from those walking death flags, I've had to struggle along this hard road. Nivea Herback silently renewed her resolve with the motto, better to be a villainess than a saintess. Nivea Herback's body gradually sank into the water, and she reminded herself, I have to try to remember the future events and avoid them. Then she sighed, this is such a headache. The next day, the whole village gathered to bid farewell to Nivea Herback and Phil. The village chief took Nivea Herback's hand and said sincerely, Sir Knight, young lady, thank you again. You two are the saviors of this village. Then another villager said warmly, please stop by any time. We will always welcome you. At that moment, Malin also said sincerely, thank you so much. The village chief suddenly smiled kindly, held up an item, and said to Nivea Herback, we would have liked to give you something more valuable, but as you can see, this is only a small village. As soon as Nivea Herback saw the item in the village chief's hand, her eyes lit up with excitement. She thought, baby, you've appeared. The village chief continued, this was discovered when the village was first built. We do not know what purpose you might use it for, but the villagers here believe it brings good luck. Phil was just about to refuse, saying, it's all right. But Nivea Herback covered his mouth with one hand and said brightly, thank you so much. Nivea Herback hugged the item the village chief had given her and happily thought, they have no idea what this egg can do. Then she silently said in her heart, thank you very much. Phil and Nivea Herback turned around and climbed onto the horse. The villagers shouted after them, have a safe trip. We wish you both a good journey. Phil and Nivea Herback traveled until the sky gradually grew dark. Then they said to each other, the sun is about to set. We should find a place to camp first. Phoenix. After they found a place to stop, Phil turned around and told her, start the fire. I'll go hunt something. Nivea Herback turned her head away and mumbled, go on. The two turned their backs on each other. Phil's face was bright red, while Nivea Herback looked away. Neither of them knew how to react. Then Phil turned and left, his face cold again, his sword at his side as he walked in easy pace. After a while, Phil hummed a signal. A figure wearing a black veil suddenly appeared behind him. Phil frowned, turned his head, and asked, what happened to the bandits? The man wearing the black mask replied, they have all been thrown into prison, sir. Hearing that, Phil relaxed his brow and praised him lightly. Well done. And the Duke's movements? The strange man said, the exchange of correspondence is increasing. Hearing that, Phil furrowed his brow, raised a hand to his chin, and pondered. Then the unknown man continued, and a large amount of money has recently been transported in the same direction. Phil tilted his head and asked, to the Duke? The unknown man in black replied, not on the surface. However, when we investigated more deeply, we discovered that they are all the Duke's subordinates. Hearing that, Phil replied, continue observing them. Do not miss even the smallest movement. Hearing that, the man wearing the black veil lowered himself before Phil and answered respectfully, yes, Prince Kelsey. As for Phil's true identity in the kingdom of Kelsey, Alaric Erasin, he was the commander of the enemy nation, the kingdom of Erasin, and the official heir to the throne. He was traveling to investigate Duke Ethios. After learning of his suspicious movements, it seemed as though everything had settled down after a long while. But things were not that simple. Then the mysterious man handed Phil a letter and said, please take a look at this. The moment Phil saw the letter, his face darkened, and he asked, what is this? The mysterious man replied, an agreement between Duke Timutero and Marquis Herback. It clearly states that the two families will form an alliance through an engagement between their heirs. Phil's face darkened with anger. His brows drew tightly together as he pressed, with Nivea Herback? The mysterious man replied, precisely. However, the agreement was signed long ago. We believe it took place after they received the news. The Saintess candidate came from House Herback. Phil clenched the letter in his hand, his sharp brows furrowing as he hissed through gritted teeth. I see, Phil thought to himself. Nivea Herback is engaged to Ethios Timutero. An engagement between them and the Saintess candidate, Nivea Herback, is the key point connecting everything. She may be the key, because the main conditions revolve around her becoming the Saintess. There is nothing more powerful than a divine command, Phil thought to himself. So that's why that blonde girl and the priest were looking for her. But why did she run away? Thinking of Atticus Timutero, when the kingdom was founded, the family that had contributed the most was Duke Atticus's family, House Timutero. Their wealth, influence, and military power were unmatched. They were also greedier than anyone, often threatening to overthrow the royal family whenever signs of weakness appeared. Then Phil leaned slightly as he listened to the mysterious man continue. I just caught one in the nearby stream. The mysterious man held a fish he had just caught and offered it to his master. Phil said, "Thank you." The mysterious man continued, "Please forgive your subordinate for being unable to prepare it for you personally." Suddenly, Phil called the mysterious man by name. Eden was startled at being called, but he still answered respectfully, "Yes, Your Highness." Phil suddenly became serious and asked, "I'm not asking you as a prince." Eden could only reply in confusion, "Yes?" Phil continued, "I'm asking you as one man to another." Eden broke out in a cold sweat and replied in bewilderment, "Yes." The two whispered to each other for a while. Then Eden suddenly panicked. His eyes went wide as he shouted, "Wah, you're asking how yours is?" Eden's whole body stiffened, cold sweat pouring down his face. He stammered, It is a masterpiece of creation, enormous, magnificent, and a treasure of this world." Phil replied, "Stop flattering me. I want the truth." Eden sweated heavily, put both hands behind his back, and said firmly, "Your subordinate is not lying. Your Highness is the finest of all those your subordinate has ever seen. Even among the royal family. No, even in this entire kingdom." Phil whipped around, not wanting to hear any more, and said, "Stop. I've heard enough." Phil walked off while humming a tune, his mood soaring, leaving Eden frozen in place, not knowing what to do. Two fish were roasting beside the crackling fire. He sat watching the fire and chatted with her. "We'll arrive at Herbat Castle in 4 days." Hearing that, she asked, "Once we get there, what will you do, Sir Knight? Will you come inside with me?" Hearing that, he refused her. "No, I need to go to another territory." Soon, the two sat facing each other. She said, "But then I won't have a chance to thank you for bringing me this far." Hearing that, he comforted her as well. "It's fine. I still have other places to go. You've already done plenty to thank me." She thought it over again. Maybe it's better if he doesn't go in with me. I'm sure I'll be treated coldly in that house. She remembered her weak father, who only knew how to cry and say, "I'm sorry, my child," and her wicked stepmother's words, "Until you are chosen as the Saintess, don't even dream of setting foot in this house again." She grew so angry that her head spun. Ugh, the more I think about it, the angrier I get. How is anyone supposed to save a family like that? Seeing her holding her forehead with her hand, he asked with concern, "What's wrong? Do you have a headache?" She answered, "No, there are just a lot of things to think about." He immediately asked, "Like what?" She did not answer him right away, instead thinking to herself, "After bathing, I feel completely refreshed. If only there was some alcohol too. I can't believe I'm feeling this upset." Only then did she speak to him. "Actually, I ran away from the temple." Hearing her words, he looked at her in surprise. She began confiding in him. "Because I didn't want to become a saintess or whatever, but my family did everything they could to make me become one." Hearing that, he asked, "It's something you don't want?" She sat with her arms wrapped around her bent knees. As she spoke, she did not look at him, but stared at some distant point. "I'm not sure. I didn't know before, but now." Her heart was filled with things she wanted to say. "I don't want to become any saintess, even though I know it would help rebuild my family's reputation, which has fallen to rock bottom. And it's the only way for me to marry Duke Ethios." After saying that, she let out a sigh. "Is there any alcohol left?" Hearing her ask, he looked a little helpless. "There is, but..." After saying that, he took out the wine flask and handed it to her. She took a satisfying gulp. Then she lightly wiped her mouth with her hand and continued, "At first, they said that if one person had to be unhappy to bring a comfortable life to the whole family, then it was something that had to be done. But when I thought about it again, this is the only life I have. And I realized I don't need to bear any unhappiness at all." She continued speaking. "Will my happiness make the people around me happy too? There is no guarantee that my sacrifice will bring happiness to my family." He had been sitting quietly and listening to her all this time, and he had come to understand her situation. Stroking his chin, he said, "That's true." At that moment, she placed her left hand on the right side of her chest. Her face looked happy as she spoke. "Happiness comes from myself, from my own life. I've lived a life of running away for long enough. I want to say whatever I want by the things I love, eat what I like. Those things that seem so small. After hearing her words, he remained silent and said nothing, simply sitting there and listening. Seeing him like that, she thought, isn't he more handsome when he sits there obediently and listens? Nivea stretched and continued telling her story. So I left the temple, but for some reason, those people suddenly started searching for me. I even told the Duke I would break off the engagement. After hearing that, he asked in surprise, "What?" Seeing him react that way, she was puzzled. "Why are you so surprised? Is a Viscount's daughter not allowed to break off an engagement with a Duke?" He hurriedly denied it. That's not it. But in his heart, he was slowly digesting the information. The agreement. Duke Ethios. Engagement. Saintess. Breaking off the engagement. She did not know what he was thinking and simply continued. "I once liked him like a moth to a flame." Then she thought to herself, though that wasn't really me. He asked in confusion, "What does like a moth to a flame mean?" She did not explain clearly, only saying, "It means I was a pathetic clown." He asked her in return, "Then what did the Duke say?" At that moment, her face showed disdain. She smirked, looking very calm. He didn't say anything at all. He just stood there with a stupid look on his face. He seemed unconvinced and asked, "Really?" She replied, "Probably because he wanted that too. From the start, he never had any interest in me. The two of us were only engaged because our families told us to." After saying that, she finally realized the issue and looked at him a little awkwardly. "I've been talking about myself this whole time. It must be because of the alcohol. My mouth just won't stop moving." He answered, "It's fine. I was curious about you too." Hearing that, she did not believe him. "No way. You were curious too." He explained, "Ever since those people from the temple asked about you, I've kept wondering." Hearing that, she also remembered. "Oh, that's right. That did happen. It was probably because that old bald priest gave the order." Curious, he asked her, "Then where did you learn archery?" She answered vaguely, "Well, I needed to know something that would help me survive." After saying that, she immediately laid down on the ground with her back to him, using her hand as a pillow. "Why do you want to know so much? We're out of alcohol, so I'm not in the mood to have a heart-to-heart anymore." Hearing her words, he said helplessly, "Hey, you should finish what you're saying before ending the conversation." As soon as he said that, he saw that she had already fallen asleep. The next morning, in contrast to her sleeping soundly in her sleeping bag, he now wore an exhausted face, with dark circles under his eyes, unable to sleep. Because he was curious, he walked over and shook her. "Hey, wake up." Since she was fast asleep, she spoke in her sleep. Sir Knight, rare talent." Her unclear words made him wonder, a long sword? Why not say long sword or great sword? Just as he finished thinking that, he heard her make a retching sound. Realizing she was about to vomit, he panicked and shook her harder, shouting, "Wake up right now." At that moment, she finally woke up, rubbing her eyes while yawning. "Is it morning already?" He immediately said, "The sun is already shining on your backside. Hurry up and wash your face." She opened her eyes wide and looked at him, exclaiming, "Wow, Sir Knight." He asked what. She said, "Look at those dark circles. Your eyes show your exhaustion so clearly." She teased him, "Oh my, eyes that alluring could easily cause trouble for the people." Hearing her tease him, he said nothing and simply stared at her in silence. Seeing that his face was growing irritated, she became a little scared and thought she should stop teasing him. "Fine, I'll be quiet, all right? You're about to burn a hole through my face with that stare. I'll go wash my face right now." Just then, something seemed to startle him. He looked up at the sky and stood up, his hand also reaching into his pocket as if to take something out. She noticed as well, and with bow and arrow in hand, she ran over, thinking to herself, "Is it an enemy or a monster?" At the same time, he threw a knife into the sky, but it only grazed the bird and did not hit it. Seeing that, he cursed, "Damn it." She was also standing behind him, her hand ready to draw the bow. Confused, he turned to look and saw her posing there, standing with her bow aimed at the sky. At that moment, she looked no different from a goddess. She shot an arrow into the air. Seeing that, he thought in confusion, what is she aiming at? Even the best archer in the palace couldn't hit it. Just as he finished thinking that, he heard her say, "Bullseye." He could not believe it and thought, no way. But reality seemed to slap him in the face. The arrow she had fired successfully pierced the bird flying in the sky. Looking at the scene before him, he could not help being stunned, frozen in place. She asked him in confusion, "Sir Knight, what's wrong?" You wanted to catch that bird because of the thing tied to its leg, right? Only then did he come back to his senses and answer her. That's right. The bird that had been shot fell from the sky to the ground. Seeing him standing still, she put a hand on her hip and looked at him. What is this? I shot it for you. And now you want to go pick it up too? Hearing that, he said, ah, no. After saying that, he walked over to the bird, took out the piece of paper tied to its leg, and opened it to read. No one knew what was written inside, but after reading it, he thought, I have to change my destination. Then he threw the paper away. After that, he turned to look at her with an incredulous expression. She was carefully slinging the bow over her shoulder when she heard him ask, how did you shoot like that? Hearing him, she smiled and looked at him. Want me to teach you? Hearing that, he remained silent and said nothing. However, she ignored it and confidently said with shining eyes, you taught me how to swing a sword, so I'll teach you archery. We'll exchange skills. Hearing that, he became even more silently helpless. He slowly said, I still can't believe it, even though I saw it with my own eyes. Hearing that, she gave him a sly smile and glanced at him. Why are you frozen like that? You've fallen for my charm, haven't you? Seeing her confident attitude, he found it irritating. Cut down on the nonsense. However, she paid him no mind. Blushing with satisfaction, she walked off and said, looks like I just shot Cupid's arrow too. He blushed as he watched her back. For days later, he looked up at the gloomy sky. Then he said, it probably won't rain. She did not believe him and looked at him as if to say the sky was clearly overcast. He said, if we keep going, we'll reach her back territory before sunset. After hearing him, she sighed and murmured, time really flies. Hearing that, he looked at her. At that moment, she let out another sigh. He called her name, Nivea Herback. Hearing her name, she turned her head to look at him. What? He said, let's keep going. Then the two climbed onto the horse and set off. All along the road, she kept chatting cheerfully with him in high spirits. As for him, he said nothing and simply sat behind her, quietly listening to her talk. A gust of wind blew past, making her hair drift lightly and brush against him. The scene at that moment was extremely romantic. Embarrassed, he tightened his grip a little. When they arrived in her back territory, the two dismounted. At that moment, he and she remained silent, saying nothing. Sensing that the atmosphere was a little awkward, she started the conversation first. Thank you for your help, Sir Knight. He replied gently. Thanks to you, the journey wasn't boring at all. She smiled and asked, where did you say you were planning to go again? Adam, right? He answered her, I changed my destination. Hearing that, she did not know what else to say except, I see. After saying that, she held out her hand in front of him and smiled as beautifully as a flower. It's a little sad that we have to part. Why don't we shake hands to end this journey? He looked at the hand she held out, but only remained silent. Seeing that, she asked, what is it? Is my hand not worthy of you, Sir Knight? Hearing her say that, he took something out of his pocket and placed it in her hand. He remembered what his subordinate had told him back then. She sold all her gemstone jewelry at a pawn shop, then used most of the money to buy food for the children. That was probably her final emergency fund. Back then, he had said, I should compensate her for all the misunderstandings I've had about her until now. She looked at the golden object adorned with a pink stone, glittering brightly in her hand, and asked curiously, what is this? He immediately said, can't you tell? It's a comb. She also replied, I can see that, but why? Before she could finish speaking, her face turned ashen. She remembered that every morning she woke up with her hair disheveled like a bird's nest, looking absolutely terrifying. At that time, he had asked her, can't you comb your hair and tidy it up? Since she was half asleep then, she had casually said, buy me a comb before you say anything. And yet he had actually done it. If you intended to give this to me from the start, you should have given it to me sooner. He also said, since no one saw you, what was the point of combing it? She immediately replied, you saw me. But he calmly answered, I'm used to that sight now. Hearing that, she flew into a rage. Her face twisted as she thought, does he think I'm happy having that scene brought up? After thinking that, she angrily put the comb into her pocket. Unfortunately, a golden object fell out her pocket. He picked it up, looked at it, and said, it looks like a ring. He remembered that this was the shape of Duke Temutero's seal and thought to himself, the engagement ring. She didn't throw it away, but kept it. Afterward, he handed it to her and turned to leave, but before he left, he threw out one last remark. You really are a foolish girl. Hearing him, she got angry once again, her hand clenching tightly into a fist. What the hell did he just say? I really should have shot an arrow through him. Then she looked at the ring in her hand and sighed. She thought to herself, I figured this thing was probably valuable, so I planned to sell it if I ever ran out of money. She stood before her family's mansion. However, at that moment, the two guards would not let her in and refused her. You may not enter. She did not understand, and her mind spun as she asked, Huh? The guard standing in front of her had no emotion on his face and said coldly, No one may enter the Viscount's mansion before their identity has been confirmed. The guard looked at Nivea and said, We cannot allow a person with an unverified identity to enter the Viscount's mansion. Hearing that, Nivea grew angry and corrected him. I told you, I'm Nivea. However, that guard remained stubborn and said she could not enter. Hearing that, she felt helpless and wondered to herself, Is this guy an answering machine or something? Should I ask him if he's a robot? She pointed at herself and shouted loudly, I already told you I'm the eldest daughter of House Herback. Are you not listening? The soldier on this side did not seem shaken at all. He continued, You may not enter. Please go back. Nivea frowned and wondered, Who put this idiot here? Wait a second. Don't tell me. She folded her arms and asked seriously, You mean Nivea Herback is not allowed to enter, right? The soldier glanced to the side and said nothing. Nivea snapped angrily. Unbelievable. She clutched her head and tugged at her hair. They must have heard I ran away from the temple. But whose fault is it that I had to suffer and run all the way back here? And they just abandoned their own child in the street like this. She clenched her fists, radiating murderous fury as she said, What a trash family. The soldier, standing nearby, broke out in a cold sweat. She continued thinking, So this is it? They want me to go back to the temple and become the Saintess. Otherwise, I shouldn't even dream of setting foot in the house. Then she sighed. Suddenly, Nivea plopped down on the ground and complained, Oh my God, either I go into the forest and get swallowed by monsters, or I starve to death. Ugh, I'm exhausted. The soldier beside her stammered, Miss, you shouldn't sit down here like that. Hearing that, she asked irritably, Oh, what do you think I'm trying to do? If I go out there and get killed, will you take responsibility? The soldier fell silent. She added, Then do you have somewhere for me to go? The soldier's face turned pale. Another soldier appeared. The first soldier immediately whispered, Is the young lady always like this? The newly arrived soldier said, Didn't people say she was very timid? Maybe she became like this because the temple was too stifling. Or maybe some runaway lunatic is pretending to be the young lady. No longer bothering to sit, Nivea lay flat on the ground and said, Whatever. I don't care anymore. Seeing that, the two soldiers panicked and wondered, She's lying down in the road? After that, Nivea went back to sleep. Both soldiers marveled. She actually fell asleep. Sometime later, Nivea slowly woke up. She suddenly opened her eyes, drool still at the corner of her mouth. Then she sprang upright, making the two soldiers who were eating bread freeze on the spot. She looked at the two of them, scratched her head, and said, Oh, did you two change shifts? Hello. The sun has already gone down. No wonder I'm so hungry. Nivea's eyes suddenly grew sparkling, and she even began to drool. She emphasized, I think I'm hungry. The soldier kept eating his bread while pretending to ignore her. Seeing that, she emphasized every word. I am really, really hungry. After that, no one knew exactly what happened. Nivea was eating the bread with great satisfaction, while the soldier sniffled and said, She took my bread. Night fell. Nivea carefully wiped her dagger clean with a handkerchief. Suddenly, someone called, Nivea, drawing her attention. A woman appeared behind her. It was Azula Herback, the Marchioness and her stepmother. Nivea replied, Mother. Azula said unpleasantly, Look at that disgraceful state you're in. Nivea answered, I had nothing suitable to wear throughout the long journey. Azula sneered contemptuously, A daughter of a marquis wearing the clothes of common rabble? And what have you done to your hair for it to be so messy? Also, where are the Saintess robes you were supposed to be wearing? Nivea thought irritably, wow, look at the way she talks to me after not seeing me for so many years. Facing her directly like this after reading the description of her in the story makes me want to. No, wrong word. It makes my hands itch to chop that face of hers. Azula said angrily, Have you forgotten your duty? Do you even remember why you went to the temple? Nivea replied sarcastically, No, I have not. Azula raised her voice. Then go back there once. She emphasized further, I remember telling you clearly. Don't even think of coming back here until you become the Saintess. Nivea fumed inwardly. I know she's my stepmother, but does she really have to slap me in the face like this? At the very least, shouldn't I get one warm family meal after everything I've done for this house all these years? In the end, she sighed and said, Let's go inside and talk. I want to see father and my brother too. Her stepmother flinched and said, "What?" Then she asked, "Did you not hear a word I said?" Nivea replied calmly, "I said let's go inside. Are you not even going to let me enter my own home?" Azula curled her lips and answered, "Huh? After the temple treated you like a saintess, who do you think you are? Do you think you're important?" Nivea pouted and said, "Listen here, old woman. I don't have time to come here just to see you. A smart dog knows not to block the road, so move aside and let me in." Azula shouted in frustration, "What, old woman? Did you hit your head somewhere?" Nivea replied with an innocent expression, "It's obvious you don't like hearing me call you mother." Her stepmother trembled with anger and shouted, "You ill-mannered little brat." Nivea sighed and answered, "I wonder who raised me into the person I am today." She continued, "I'll consider this our greeting. Besides, father will soon know I've come here, so you won't be able to keep me blocked outside forever." Her stepmother gritted her teeth, while Nivea felt secretly proud. That foolish little girl is gone. I'm here now, so you'd better be scared, old woman. Her stepmother turned away and said, "If you dare say any nonsense to your father, just wait to be thrown out of here." Nivea said to herself, "Wait for me." Then she clenched her fist and said, "Julia." Inside the house, Nivea's father, Conat her back, spread his arms wide and said, "Oh, Nivea, isn't this my daughter Nivea?" The man hugged her tightly, and she said, "It has been a long time, father." Conat said, "I missed you so much." He shook her shoulders and asked, "Where have you been?" Nivea asked him, "Did they not tell you? I went to the temple." He said, "Ah, so that was it. I forgot." He said emotionally, "Nivea, my daughter, since when did you grow this tall?" He stroked her hair and continued, "Back then, you were so tiny, and now you've come back all grown up." Azula took Conat's hand and said, "Dear, go inside and rest. It's time for your medicine." He looked at her and said, "That's right, my dear. Our daughter Nivea has returned." Azula quickly said, "We greeted each other earlier." He said, "Is that so? Then let us have dinner together." But Azula cut him off. "Let's leave that for tomorrow. The child must be tired today. She traveled such a long way, so it will be better to let her rest." Nivea thought, Azula has always treated father, whose mind isn't clear, like this. She has spared no method to turn house her back into the possession of herself and her son. Before her eyes stood her father, yet his eyes no longer held their former sharpness. She thought to herself, according to the original plot, everything goes her way, and her son becomes the heir of the family. Nivea looked toward her stepmother and father in displeasure. She had already placed her dagger behind her back, her hand clenched tightly in anger. Another voice rang out, "Nivea, have you been well?" It was Nudolf her back, Azula's son. She did not even bother paying attention to him and replied, "Figure out yourself." The man laughed scornfully and said, "No need to ask you. I can tell just by looking. Those cheap clothes suit you perfectly." She looked at this detestable son of hers, sighed, and thought, this mother and son really are exactly alike. That's why people say the importance of parental education should never be overlooked. She sarcastically pointed at her clothes and said, "Oh, this? Clothes can't change a person's origins." Then she looked at her so-called brother and said, "Unlike someone I know." His face twisted. She thought to herself, looks like he hasn't learned how to hide his emotions from his mother yet. Suddenly, a shout rang out. "You!" Nudolf drew his sword and yelled, "How dare a lunatic like you?" But for some reason, no matter how long they waited, he still could not pull the sword out of its sheath. Nivea stood there, staring at his helpless expression. Unable to hold back her laughter, she snorted, then mocked him. "You really were born as the lowest of the low, the basest of the base. And with that jumbled mixed blood of yours, too." At last, Nudolf managed to pull out his sword. He aimed it at her and shouted, "Shut your mouth." Nivea seemed ready as well. She reached behind herself and drew her dagger. The butler suddenly appeared and stood between the two of them. He said loudly, "That is enough." Nudolf stubbornly said, "Move aside, Hugo. That wench has gone mad after being away from home for too long. I have to teach that bitch a lesson." The man placed a hand on his chest and said gently, "Young master, please calm yourself." This was Hugo Callista, the head butler. Hearing that, Nudolf gritted his teeth. Nivea, meanwhile, thought regretfully, "Damn, what a shame. I didn't get to beat him so badly his mother wouldn't recognize him." Her brother's voice rang out again. "Then tell me, Hugo, what is she that she dares insult me?" The butler stood there and asked, "Should blood really be shed between family members?" Nudolf said furiously, "Then what do you expect me to do to swallow this anger?" Hugo asked him, "How about this? he said, except in the event that Lord Conat requests to see her. The young lady will rest in her room until she leaves. Nivea wondered in irritation. Oh, are you planning to tuck me away in a corner so no one can see me? In other words, confine me in my room? The young master walked away and said, make sure not even a single strand of red hair enters my sight. The head butler bowed his head and said, understood. Nivea stuck out her tongue mockingly. Hugo said to a soldier, what are you standing there for? Escort the young lady to her room at once. The man grabbed Nivea by the arm and led her away. She wondered, this is supposed to be an escort? It feels more like I'm being hauled off as a prisoner. Hugo said gently, Lady Nivea, please return to your room. Nivea asked stubbornly, what if I don't want to? Hugo answered firmly, you must go even if you do not want to. Or would you prefer to see blood spilled? Nivea curled her lips as she looked at him, then recalled when the two of them were young. Hugo watched Nivea regretfully and asked, do you really have to go? Little Nivea could only answer, I have to go, Hugo. She continued, you know that's the only way my brother can survive. Hearing that, Hugo fell silent. Then he watched Nivea's back as she slowly left in the carriage. Returning to the present, she thought to herself, I still had a little hope because he was the only person in this house who treated me and my brother well. Looking at Hugo, she wondered, is that why I feel so disappointed? She sighed and said, fine, let's go. I want to lie down and rest anyway. She pulled her arm free from the soldier and said, but I prefer walking without someone dragging me. I can walk on my own. Hugo thought for a moment, then said, I will guide you, my lady. The two of them walked together down the corridor, Hugo in front and Nivea behind him, along with two maids. She looked at the young man in front of her and thought inwardly, I want to give him a punch. That would make me feel better. Hugo suddenly turned around, making her jump in fright. He said to her, we have arrived. Sweat broke out on her as she thought. That scared me. Hugo stepped aside to let Nivea enter the room. She and the maid entered the room, and the maid prepared the bedding. After she was done, Nivea touched the mattress and sat down on it. The door slammed shut after the maid left. At that moment, Hugo said, why? He covered his face and asked, why did you come back here? He continued, when you chose to leave like that, you should not have returned. Nivea replied lightly, this is my home, so I came back. What else do you want? Hugo raised his voice. If you intended to come back here, then you should never have left in the first place. Nivea looked straight at him and asked, are you blaming me? Hugo fell silent. She continued, the temple was not a place for me. Is that reason enough? As Hugo remained silent, she went on, this is where I should be. His expression darkened as he asked, did you not leave by your own choice? She called his name, Hugo. Then she asked, do you really think I went to the temple just because I wanted to become the Saintess? She continued, and why are you speaking to me like this? She asked again, is that what you want to say to me after I finally came back after all these years? That I shouldn't have returned here. Her face turned cold as she said, you did not even bother asking how I was. You act as though you were doing this for the sake of this family. But in truth, you turned your back just to survive, didn't you? And I could see that you decided to side with Azula and Nudolf. Hugo's face darkened as he heard her words. He gritted his teeth and said, you said you would never return, so I never waited for you. After saying that, Hugo clenched his hands tightly into fists, but Nivea did not notice. Hearing him say that, she folded her arms and said, why are you blaming me? I have never blamed anyone, because the decision was in your hands. After saying that, she stood up and called his name. Hugo. Hearing that, he respectfully said, yes. She called again, Hugo Callista. He patiently answered her again. I am listening. Please speak. She walked over and stood directly in front of him. Let's be honest with each other. Her words left him confused. I do not understand what you mean, my lady. She said calmly, just admit it. You waited for me to come back. You have always been waiting for the day I returned here. Hearing that, Hugo immediately denied it. I have never waited for you to return. You said with your own mouth that you would not come back. But before he could finish, she cut him off. Then she turned toward the bed. Then explain this to me. She lightly touched the bed and said, this is soft, as if it was washed just yesterday. And the blanket is very clean, as if it was hung out in the sun this morning. There is not a speck of dust on the floor, as if not a single day has passed without it being swept. Nivea was quite certain of her thoughts. She walked to the window, placed her hand on it, and lightly wiped it. Even the window of the master's room, which is not being used, is like this. After saying that, she raised her hand to look at it. See? It's spotless. After hearing her words, he blushed in embarrassment and hurriedly explained, even if a room is vacant, every room must be cleaned properly. No one knows when guests might come. His excuse could not possibly fool her. As soon as she heard it, she caught the flaw and asked in return, "Guests? Do you mean you've been using my room as a guest room?" A drop of cold sweat ran down his face as he denied it. "That is not it." She still paid no attention to his words. "So, I'm wondering why you would clean a room whose owner might or might not ever return. It feels just like you were waiting for someone." This time, he truly had nothing to say and could only remain silent. She did not want to pressure him either. "Forget it. I will not be upset even if you change sides. I respect your decision, but I hope you will cooperate." He immediately refused. "Why should I cooperate with you?" His face looked extremely pitiful at that moment. "Why should I trust you when you might disappear without warning?" She said, "Because I made a promise." Her words left him confused. "What?" "That I will never leave again while abandoning anything connected to my family." Seeing the determination overflowing from her, Hugo seemed to see a radiant light in her eyes. He blushed, said nothing, and turned to leave. The next morning, as soon as she woke up, she stretched and let out a long yawn. Rubbing her eyes to wake herself up, she thought, "I tried persuading Hugo. Looking at this completely disorganized house, I'll probably have to straighten everything out from the beginning. How exhausting. Just thinking about it makes me tired." So she lay down again, stretching both arms across the bed. "At the very least, I need to secure one powerful foothold in this house first." As soon as she thought that, she twisted around on the bed in all sorts of strange positions. She planted both hands on the bed and bent her body upward in an extremely bizarre posture. Her face was so bored it was beyond description. "My goodness, no one has come looking for me at all, and I can't drag this frail body outside either." Just thinking about it made her grit her teeth in anger. Hugo, that detestable man. Then she continued thinking, he acted as if I had convinced him, but in the end, nothing changed. At last, she stopped doing those strange movements and got off the bed. She walked to her bag, took out the comb, and blushed as she brushed her hair. She remembered that person's back and thought, "I'm acting like an idiot." As soon as she thought that, she became so angry that she slammed the comb onto the floor. She cursed, "Damn it." She picked up a round object wrapped entirely in white cloth and gave an unreadable smile. So this is that thing." Just as her hand was about to open it, she smiled so greedily that she began drooling and exclaimed, "Oh." But before she could open it, she heard someone arrive and ask, "May I come in?" So she hurriedly hid it inside her pillow before giving permission. "Ah, yeah, come in." Hearing that, the servant immediately entered. She held a tray of food in her hands and said coldly, "I have brought your meal, my lady." Watching the servant place the food on the table, Nivea thought to herself, "Wow, there's a dining room in the mansion, but they're treating me like I'm in prison. Is this room service?" She sat down at the table, looked over the food, and thought, "It probably hasn't been poisoned, right?" With one hand, she picked up the loaf of bread and broke it in half. But inside, she still could not stop thinking to herself, "If I eat this and die, I swear I'll turn into a ghost and haunt them for the rest of their lives." Just as she broke the bread, a piece of paper fell out. Curious, she opened it and saw that only 2 words were written on it, "Midnight." She did not understand, and while eating the bread, she muttered to herself, "What's supposed to happen at midnight? Hugo, are you some kind of prophetic loaf of bread or what?" In the end, she finished all of breakfast. Every plate and bowl on the tray had been wiped clean. "Phew, I'm so full. Maybe I should just sleep all the way until midnight." But as soon as she said that, she rejected the idea and made a decision. Probably not. If I don't train regularly, my body will become stiff. As soon as she thought it, she started doing push-ups. She trained from 8:30 until almost 12 before she finally finished. Just as she finished, Hugo also came in and said, "Come with me." The clock had just struck exactly midnight. She immediately heard a knock on the door to her room. She thought to herself, that irritating Hugo really is punctual. She said aloud, "Come in." He opened the door and entered, looking at her. But he said nothing and turned around. He walked out the door. She understood what he meant, so she followed him. Hugo led her into a hidden stairway. After they climbed all the steps, they saw a tightly shut door. And she stood in front of the room. At that moment, he only glanced at her. As for her, she thought in confusion, does he want me to go in? The moment she opened the door and stepped inside, Nivea was shocked by the scene before her. A red-haired girl, thin, frail, and sickly looking, was lying there. She seemed to be unconscious on the bed. Nivea walked over and called out, "Julia." Then she thought to herself, she's still breathing, right? After that, she slowly sat down on the bed. Hugo seemed to know what she was wondering, so he spoke first. Because of the side effects of the medicine, it is difficult to wake her. She immediately thought back to when they were children. Her younger sister's health had never been good. She had spent more time in bed than running around, and that had always made Nivea feel sorry for her younger sister. Just like me, she thought, whenever I look at her, it's like I'm looking at myself. She remembered herself before she had transmigrated into the novel and the accident she had suffered. I couldn't do anything after that injury. She remembered the way she had fallen into what felt like hell after the surgery. I couldn't move the way I wanted. I couldn't even hold a spoon properly. She remembered how hard she had worked in training to recover quickly. Even after going through more than half a year of hellish rehabilitation, nothing had changed much. She remembered the feeling that she had become a useless person. No longer wanting to dwell on unpleasant memories, she stood up and was about to pull the blanket over her sister when she heard a voice call, "Sister." The girl on the bed had woken up and was looking at her as she called, "Sister Nia." Nivea also calmly replied, "I'm here." The girl lying on the bed heard that, and tears immediately threatened to spill. "Is it really you? Sister, I missed you so much." Seeing her younger sister cry, Nivea became a little flustered too. "Julie, are you all right? Do you want some water?" As soon as she asked, a hand appeared, holding a glass of water in front of her. "Here." She made a small sound of surprise and took it, while Hugo helped her support her younger sister into a sitting position. Seeing her younger sister drinking water, Nivea said, "Don't force yourself too much, Julie. Just lie back down." Julie looked at her with a haggard face. "I am still all right." "Sister, when did you come back? Have you become the Saintess already?" Nivea answered her sister's questions one by one. "I only just came back. As for the Saintess matter, no. I came back because I wanted to." After hearing that, her younger sister hesitantly asked, "Is that really all right?" Nivea gently reassured her sister. "It's all fine, so you just worry about your health." Nivea asked after her with concern, "You're still taking your medicine properly, right? How do you feel?" Her younger sister's face seemed to show that there was something difficult to say. "The medicine I'm taking now is different from before." When Nivea heard that, her eyes widened and she asked, "What?" However, after hearing her question, her younger sister also stammered awkwardly, "No, there's nothing strange about it. It's just that the dosage is higher." Julie hurriedly said, "I feel better than before, so don't worry, sister." After hearing what her sister said, Nivea looked at her with suspicious eyes and asked back, "Really?" Julie's face was somewhat gloomy now. "Oh, of course. I am still fine. I'm more worried about father." Nivea asked, "Is it because his condition is getting worse?" Her younger sister hurriedly said, "He wasn't like that before." As soon as she said that, her younger sister burst into tears. "Sometimes, he doesn't even remember me anymore. And father doesn't come to visit me often anymore either." Nivea used her hand to wipe away her sister's tears. "Swallow back your tears." Julie looked at her like a child and said, "Sister." Nivea put on the bearing of an elder sister to comfort her younger sister. "Don't cry anymore. I'll take care of everything for you. You only need to think about taking your medicine on time and getting healthier." Hearing that, her younger sister lowered her head, feeling a little wrong. "Can I really get better?" Nivea smiled and said, "Of course. You'll even be able to run a full lap around this mansion." On the outside, she smiled, but inside, she was furious. Her thoughts were filled with murderous intent. "I can't believe they locked her in a shabby attic room like this, when this huge mansion has no idea how many rooms. They're just leaving her here to slowly waste away and die, aren't they? They really know how to drive me mad. Do they think I'm that nice?" She called out, "Hugo," making him look surprised when he heard it. She stood up and walked over in front of him. "Can I assume that you trust me, since you brought me here?" His face seemed to show that he had something difficult to say. Seeing that, she raised her hand and thumped one side of her chest. She asked firmly, "Won't you try trusting me just this once?" Hearing her question, he opened his mouth and said, "Aye." But suddenly, there was a pounding on the door outside the room, startling all three people inside. Nivea's face darkened as she thought, "We've been discovered." She looked anxiously at Hugo and thought to herself, "Who would come here at this hour?" Hugo was supposed to have handled everything properly. Or is this a trap he set up? However, as soon as that question arose, she hurriedly denied it inwardly. Looking at his face, probably not. At that moment, he was so frightened that his face had gone pale and bluish. Seeing that, Nivea became furious and slapped his shoulder hard with her hand. Thanks to her blow, he finally regained his composure and immediately asked aloud, "Who is it?" The person outside the door immediately answered, "It's me." "Are you in there, Hugo?" Hearing that, he asked in panic, "Lord Nudolf." Hugo exclaimed fearfully, "Lord Nudolf." Everything happened so suddenly that Nivea was somewhat confused. She could only secretly curse in her heart. Why is that guy here? That useless nobody should just go to sleep at this hour. No wonder he never gets any taller and keeps trying to join the seven dwarfs. Immediately, the terrified Hugo turned to ask her, "What should we do?" That made her extremely angry. "How would I know? Why are you asking me?" Before the two of them could regain their senses, the person outside the door shouted impatiently, "What the hell? Why won't the door open?" At that moment, Hugo could only tremble and make up a lie to salvage the situation. "It must be broken, Lord Nudolf. I will try pushing the door open, so please step back a little." After hearing that, Nudolf became even angrier and shouted, "Huh? Why would the door suddenly break? If you can't do it, move aside. I'll call someone else over." Hearing that, Hugo became even more panicked and tried his best to hold the door shut, stalling for Nivea. "Nivea, hide," he said, while not forgetting to reassure the other party. "Lord Nudolf, I think it is about to open." Only after she had managed to hide did he hurriedly open the door and let the other party in. But because Nudolf had been made to wait for quite a long time, he was extremely displeased. He snapped at Hugo, "What the hell are you doing here?" Seeing that attitude from him, Hugo could only answer cautiously, "I came to check on Lady Julia, because I heard she was unwell." As if he had only been waiting for that, the man asked back, "What? She looks no different." Now that things had come to this, Hugo had no choice but to make up a story to get through it. "She had a slight fever last night. She has just taken water and medicine." Hearing that, Nudolf could only grind his teeth and mutter resentfully, "Why is this brat's lifeline so long? Is she planning to cling on until that old madman of a father dies too?" In the middle of speaking, he suddenly stopped. He sniffed and asked Hugo, "Where is that disgusting smell coming from? Is there someone else here?" However, after hearing Hugo's answer that there was not, he seemed to realize something and asked again, "Then why are you here? Isn't there any servant in charge of this room?" Hearing his question, Hugo could only helplessly come up with an extremely reasonable excuse. "There will be a major event soon. Since invitations have to be sent out today, we do not want anything unexpected to happen before the event." He seemed to have accepted the story Hugo made up, letting out a vague hum. Sensing that his own plan had made good progress, Hugo continued to flatter him. "The main figure should shine the brightest at the inheritance ceremony. We do not want any problems to occur, do we?" After hearing Hugo's flattery, Nudolf tilted his nose up and said in an extremely proud voice, "That's right. Once I become the master, we'll kick all those things out of this house." Right now, Hugo was desperate to send him away already. He opened the door and advised him, "Please leave for now. It is late, so allow me to escort you back to your room." Before leaving, Nudolf suddenly called him Hugo. That made Hugo a little frightened, and he answered in an extremely doubtful tone, "Yes." At that moment, he secretly thought, "Don't tell me he caught us." But fortunately, Nudolf merely demanded, "Remember to fix this door soon." Thankfully, he had not discovered anything. Hugo breathed a sigh of relief and replied, "I will definitely complete it as soon as possible." After they had dealt with Nudolf, Nivea climbed back in through the window. She was drenched in sweat. In a low voice, she cursed, "You'd think I was sneaking around having an affair or something." She also secretly cursed the instigator, that dog of a man. But right after that, her younger sister, who was lying on the bed, sat up and said to her, "Sister Nia, we will be driven out soon." Hearing her sister say that, Nivea was a little puzzled and asked, "Huh?" Seeing that her sister still did not seem to understand, Julia patiently explained, "The inheritance ceremony will happen soon. As soon as Nudolf becomes the head, he will kick us out of here. So you have to run away right now, sister." Hearing what her younger sister feared, Nivea could only gently reassure her. "Julie, listen to me. We will not be kicked out." Even so, Julia was still determined to persuade her sister. She said, "No, this time we really will be," not wanting her sister to keep living forever in that fear. Nivea tried to sit down again and explain one thing to Julia. "This is our family, our territory, and the position we must inherit." Although she was slightly shaken, Julia was still rather hesitant. But before she could finish speaking, Nivea took her hand and comforted her in a gentle voice. "Just trust me. We will take everything back. There is nothing wrong with that." When Julia tried to argue again, before she could finish her sentence, she was once more cut off by her sister. Hearing that, Juliana's eyes filled with tears, and she said to Nivea, hurt and wronged. Father has been on stepmother's side for a long time now. Understanding her sister's thoughts, Nivea gently soothed her heart. That is why I am here. Thank goodness I was not too late. I'm sorry I made you wait, Julie. I'm sorry I left you alone. Hearing those words from her sister, Julia was so moved that she could not speak. Sister, I'm the one who should apologize. You went in my place. Seeing that her younger sister had finally calmed down, Nivea said, forget it. I wanted to. One of the two of us had to go, and it would not have been right for someone sick like you to go. Details from the story's contents gradually surfaced. The prophecy declared that Saintess candidates would descend upon the noble families, and there would not be only one. With two choices, because the eldest son or eldest daughter had to inherit the family. Usually the second child would be sent away. But Azula only had one child. I'm sure that woman had been plotting from that moment. Back then, Julia's condition became even worse, and Nivea decided on her own to become a Saintess candidate. That was the first day Azula smiled at Nivea. In the end, Nivea became a sacrifice for Azula's son, Nudolf, someone who did not even share a drop of blood with her. When he became the head of the family, she would become the lady of House Timutaro, a ducal family. If anything happens to my younger sister Julia, I will quit being a Saintess and return home immediately. After Azula's promise, Nivea stepped into the carriage and went to the capital of Erisilia. That was the best threat she had been able to make. Emerging from those memories of the past, Nivea gently helped her younger sister lie down on the bed. She coaxed her softly. No one can take away our happiness. How could I stand by and watch them be happy while we suffer? Hearing her sister say that, Julia was moved to tears and called out to her, sister. Seeing her sister shed tears, Nivea felt deeply heartbroken and had no choice but to comfort her. Don't cry. Julie, be strong. Don't let them see what they want to see. The current Nivea made Julia somewhat doubtful. Before, her sister had always been soft-hearted and lacking in judgment. But now, as if she understood that great anxiety, Nivea said, you don't need to worry. Julie, just remember to take your medicine on time and focus on recovering your health. Make those two things your priority. Sleep. I will come visit you again. In the final moments before she fell asleep, Julia heard, good night, Julie. Don't worry. Everything will be all right, so just trust me. After waiting until her sister had fallen asleep, Nivea left, inwardly furious. They didn't just ruin Nivea. They ruined this family too? Now it's my turn to ruin them. I'll beat you all to a pulp. Hidden peacefully inside the room, with gentle light shining through the window glass, Nivea Herback basked peacefully in that sunlight. She saw the maid open the door and come in, saying, my lady, I brought a dress for you to change into. Nivea thought, should I tell her to leave? Then she decided, never mind. If I look at that thing and try to put it on myself, it'll take until tomorrow. After that, the maid helped Nivea get ready one step at a time. She fastened the buttons and fixed Nivea's hair. Nivea looked truly lovely in that dress. After that, the maid led Nivea to the dining room. Nivea thought awkwardly, ugh, this is even more uncomfortable than a maid's uniform. I'm sure I won't be allowed out of my room unless father is lucid and calls me out to eat together. Isn't this what they call solitary confinement? She continued thinking. Fortunately, Hugo is letting me know what's going on in the house. But making something happen before the succession ceremony is going to be rather difficult. In the dining room, everyone was eating their own portion and paying no attention to her. Only her father, upon seeing her, stood up and said, oh, Nivea. His face showed worry. My daughter, I heard you were unwell. Then he asked after her, are you all right now? Nivea wondered suspiciously, why are his pupils so dilated? She glanced over at her stepmother, who was eating, and said, yes, thanks to someone. She gently sat down at the table, thinking, it's probably because I spent the whole day training in my room, so my body aches. Her stepmother unexpectedly asked after her. Nivea must be quite tired after this journey. You traveled all the way from the capital to this remote region. After all, she seemed to want to provoke Nivea. It seems both sisters have equally weak health. Her father was the one most concerned about her. He said, is that so? Nia, hurry in, sit down and eat, my child. After that, he took a hot chicken drumstick for his daughter, but the stepmother beside him snatched away the plate with the drumstick. She calmly said, dear, you should not behave so unusually. She gave it to her overstuffed son, who ate ravenously, making Nivea feel as if she were about to explode with anger. Seriously, watching him eat is like watching a pig. Her stepmother pretended to be concerned and said, because Nivea has not fully recovered yet, she will get indigestion if she eats something too greasy. Her father replied helplessly, is that so? I understand. I just thought I should nourish her properly. Nivea was still holding herself back as she said to her father, thank you for thinking of me, father. I will eat slowly and chew carefully. She looked at the boy eating in a hurry. She smiled and briefly thought, that's right, keep stuffing more down your throat. Get nice and fat, so I can devour you all raw to my heart's content. Nivea changed the subject and asked her father, Father, how has your health been lately? Her father replied, you don't need to worry about me. He flexed his arm as if to say he was perfectly fine. I'm very healthy. These past few days, I've been full of energy. Even so, she knew her father was not well at all. The dark circles under his eyes had grown even darker. His eyes were full of exhaustion, and his hair was tangled and dry. Nivea still gritted her teeth and endured her father's lies. She pretended to be cheerful and replied, is that so? I heard you were taking medicine. Father, but it looks like your condition is improving. He said, it is the finest medicine personally prepared for me by the Marchioness. Nivea thought inwardly, her gaze sharpening medicine. That is the most suspicious thing of all. The young butler with white hair seemed to be afraid of something. Her stepmother immediately said, that's right. It is a medicine made from many precious herbs. They only grow in my relative's territory. Nivea paid attention and asked, then may I try it? Those words startled the woman. What? Nivea said innocently, Mother said my health has not been good lately. So if I take that medicine too, I might feel better. The woman looked at her in silence for a moment. Then she said, there's not much left at the moment, especially since that medicine is very difficult to prepare. And your father's health must come first, so wait a few more days. Nivea calmly said, of course, father must come first. But she thought, Azula's relative's territory? Her stepmother took the initiative. Nivea, when do you plan to return to the temple? Suddenly, her son opened his mouth. That's right. When are you leaving? They even sent a letter saying they were searching for you, so I replied that you would return soon. Her father was surprised and said, the temple? What is my daughter doing there? The woman replied, have you forgotten? How many times must I remind you? The child went to the temple to become a Saintess candidate after being summoned by God. Then he said, oh, is that so? I remember now. The woman continued, Nivea will bring glory to our family. Filled with ambition, she said, as both a duchess and a saintess. Nivea calmly said, I will return there once I have fully recovered. The woman said, that sounds good. Then Nivea stood up and gently said, Father, I am tired, so please excuse me first. He asked her, you will not have tea with me? But her stepmother added, it seems Nivea is tired. Her father was also reassured and said, I suppose so. Rest until you feel better. Once you are well, go for a walk with father. She smiled faintly and said, yes, together with Julia too. Nivea returned to her room, but in her heart, she was calculating something. The timeline was saying, there are about 15 days left until the inheritance ceremony. They must be secretly wishing I would disappear as quickly as possible. Let's see who will be the last one laughing. Night fell. The butler came to her room and asked, are you asleep? Seeing that she had pulled the blanket over something as if hiding it, Nivea raised her head and said, no. He wondered, is that an egg? She answered, that's right. He still asked, and you are incubating it? That made him worried. Did you lay it? Startled, she threw a pillow at him. Are you crazy? He asked. Then what creature's egg is it? Nivea answered decisively, I don't know, leaving our young butler completely frozen. Nivea threw another pillow at his face. Are you insane? He wondered. You were hugging and cherishing it so lovingly, so? She said in irritation. Have you ever seen a human lay an egg? He replied, no. Then he continued, but I heard that God's messenger can do impossible things. Nivea said, I'm not a saintess yet. She snapped, if you do not want to become an unnecessary person in my life, watch your mouth. She thought inwardly, how would you know how valuable this egg is? This egg is something Ethios almost obtained in the original story. This is that egg. She remembered the original story. Ethios had short hair that barely reached his shoulders. Hugo had pale blonde hair, leaning slightly to one side in that village. He was startled. What? You want me to help find your children? They answered, yes, yes. An old man begged him, please, your highness, help us. But he answered indifferently, I only stopped here to rest for a short while. I do not have time to deal with matters like this. Several days have already passed, so it is probably too late to find them. The people knelt down again and begged, we will offer you the miraculous egg passed down through our village for generations. So please, Lord Ethios, he stopped. An egg, he still said indifferently. What is so important about that? Enough. Let's move on. In her previous life, there had been a passage in the novel Nivea read. An egg? What is so important about that? The Duke turned around and left, unaware of the egg's true value. Hugo, the butler, was still asking, so what creature's egg is it? Nivea replied calmly, I don't know. I don't know either. She remembered how, in her previous life, she had been curious about the egg's true value. What on earth is it, anyway? Because the author had only written that one line. Nivea thought inwardly, I was curious too, so I always remembered it. Since the novel wrote it that way, it must have some unimaginable value. Nivea then asked him, by the way, about that medicine. Are you sure it is not poison? He answered, Lady Azula personally prepared it, and personally gave it to his lordship to drink. She said, so you do not know what it is either. Hugo gave a shocking answer. That is why I stole some and drank it to test it. She said in surprise, you drank it? And she thought inwardly, you are braver than I thought. I will remember your loyalty. But Hugo's words startled her. Yes. However, there was no problem at all. She was surprised and asked him, what? Are you sure it was that medicine? Hugo was certain. Both the smell and the color were the same. I even stood beside her and watched while she prepared it. Nivea was doubtful. Is it really medicine? I thought there was something wrong with it. She changed the subject. Let us set that aside for now. I need you to send someone to that territory and investigate that herb. We need to know what that medicine is. Hugo bowed his head in obedience. I will do as you command, my lady. I will send someone trustworthy to Sandra as soon as the sun rises. She asked him, how long will it take to reach Sandra? He replied, if I entrust it to someone who can travel quickly, there will be results in 4 days. Nivea spoke up. And one more thing. Yes, she said firmly, I want to meet my aunt. Hugo narrowed his eyes. Your aunt is a strict person. She recalled that Nivea had an aunt on her mother's side. That aunt was known as an outstanding knight of the kingdom of Erasin and an unmarried woman who headed her family. In Nivea's memories, her aunt was strong and dignified, holding a brilliant golden sword. Such was the majesty of the family head. Hugo was startled and said no. Have you lost your mind? He said worriedly. Who knows what will happen if you meet her? She said firmly. Why? She's my aunt. What is wrong with a niece meeting her aunt? She remembered the novel. Nivea's mother was the daughter of a Viscount family, the same rank as father, and I remember that family was elevated to a county after my aunt became a head. I do not know the details behind it, but I know my aunt deeply despised House Herback. When Duke Ethios and the prince go to war in the future, of course my aunt is on the royal family side, not the Duke's. The person her younger sister's family sided with. She thought, what was the prince's name again? Something with A.T.? Whatever. They made the name so long that people cannot remember it. That's right, she unconsciously said. She probably would not kill a niece who, before she could finish speaking, Hugo cut her off. She will definitely send you straight to your grave. Nivea stood up and said, why? I know my aunt hates our family. Hugo added, have you forgotten? Then he remembered her aunt's frightening expression. Frelia Adam had especially emphasized, do not appear before me unless we are planning to start a territorial war. Hearing this, Nivea immediately put on an innocent, naive expression. Hugo, to be honest, I endured harsh training at the temple for too long, including psychological training, so I forgot quite a few things. It should not even be called training anymore. It was more like being treated as a criminal. She acted even cuter. So perhaps I have some mild memory loss, especially when it comes to bad memories I want to forget. Her appearance made him waver. Lady Nivea, but then he came back to his senses and changed his expression, as if I would believe you. She thought irritably, damn it, I thought it worked. Hugo said, for what I can see, not only your memories, but your personality has also changed considerably. He said, to be honest, at first I even wondered whether you truly were Lady Nivea, because the change was so great. Well, that is because she hesitated and said, it has been many years since I returned home. Hugo replied, that is not what I meant. Your appearance is still Lady Nivea's, but I still cannot understand. His words made her break out in a cold sweat. Because everything he said was true. She lost her composure and shouted, shut up. Hugo was startled. Why so suddenly? Nivea immediately pointed at him. Do not judge someone when that person is standing right in front of you. I am me. Who else would I be? Ah, yes. She crossed her arms and continued irritably. Anyway, my memories are just a little hazy. Now tell me why my relationship with my aunt is bad. Then Hugo helplessly explained, Frelia Adam is the head of House Adam. After hearing just one sentence, she thought, HM, Atem sounds familiar. She remembered a black-haired young man. That's right, that long-haired swordsman. Did that knight not also say he would go there? Nivea Herback stood with her arms crossed and asked firmly, Hugo. He answered, Freelia Adam strongly opposed the marriage between your father and mother, so she was always at odds with your father. Just because of that? He replied, no. What comes after is the important part. Hugo frowned. The main issue is your mother. She became seriously ill after giving birth to Lady Julia. Then she passed away, and your father remarried immediately after. Nivea cut him off. All right, I understand. She thought inwardly. So to sum it up, 1. They married despite my aunt's opposition. 2. My mother did not live well because she became seriously ill after having a baby. 3. My father remarried even though that position had not even grown cold yet. Nivea recalled the day her father and Azula married. Countess Freelia had come to warn them, terrifying the newlyweds and the priest. Conat and Nivea turned pale and trembled before her sword point. Freelia glared, brimming with murderous intent. After today, no matter who it is, she pointed the gleaming tip of her sword straight at their faces. She growled, if I ever clearly see anyone from that damned house Herback swaggering before me, I will not let that day pass peacefully. Nivea asked blankly, is that what my aunt's usual personality is like? Hugo answered with a pale, frightened face. She has a quick temper. Nivea scratched her head awkwardly. If I think about it again, I can understand why my aunt acted that way. She resented it. How humiliating. Although Conat needed a wife to take care of his 2 children. From my aunt's point of view, thinking about father marrying another woman before he had even finished mourning his late wife. Just then, Hugo spoke up, shattering her train of thought. He stopped her. No matter the reason, we cannot ignore that warning. Going to meet her is impossible. Nivea sighed. Because my aunt received the king's favor and her family's rank was also raised to that of count. The family had secretly aligned itself with the royal family. Thinking that a member of House Adam, Nivea's mother, married into the opposing faction like that is ridiculous. She flipped her hair in annoyance. Well, Azula became the Marchioness of this family, so what can be done? At least my aunt is much more normal. Nivea was displeased. If I had been there, I would probably have smashed a few heads. Hugo was horrified. What? She calmly shrugged. I understand. My aunt was right to be angry. She probably hates seeing my face too. Hugo answered immediately. That is right. Suddenly, Nivea made an extremely sharp turn. She said cheerfully, but I need to meet her. That made him furious. Lady Nivea, have you been listening to anything I have said? She said seriously. I need help. I need my aunt's help, even if I have to beg. Hugo had no choice. He was speechless before her, his brow furrowed in concern over what was to come. The scene shifted to a dark and gloomy place. It was so silent here that not a single person could be seen. Nivea walked upright in a black cloak, gripping a bow and arrows tightly in her hand. Hugo led a horse over at a leisurely pace. The two of them met each other's eyes. He reminded her, you must come back safely. If you're caught, Nivea gave a wry laugh and cut him off. Stop. I definitely will not drag you into it. Hugo sighed gloomily. He kindly instructed her, Nivea, this is the map to Adam. She said eagerly, thank you, Hugo. As soon as he finished speaking, she grabbed the saddle, and in an instant, Nivea had easily mounted the horse. Hugo was surprised. You know how to ride a horse too? She said clearly, of course. She awkwardly recalled practicing horseback riding with Phil until her bottom broke out in rashes. After riding that much, how could I not know how? Looking at her, Hugo was still uneasy. Are you sure you do not need me to send someone along to protect you? Nivea said confidently, it is more comfortable to go alone. I came here from the capital by myself. She fell silent for a moment, as if thinking of something distant. She said, if they find out, just tell them I ran away. Hugo said helplessly, I wish you would. Those words startled her and made her still. Nivea turned to him in confusion. What? He lowered his face. It would be better if you simply ran away. Hugo's face darkened as he anxiously thought about the future to come. Once the inheritance ceremony is completed, everyone knows what will happen when she returns after Azula and Nudolf have completely seized control of her back. Something terrible will surely descend, but at least one person will still survive. Nivea looked at him thoughtfully. In the end, she declared, forget it. I told you I will not run away anymore. I will definitely return. After saying that, she decisively rode away on horseback, leaving Hugo standing there, watching. In pain, he spoke their usual promise. I will wait for you. A passing breeze made Hugo's hair flutter. He looked utterly hopeless. A pair of saws came to an abrupt stop as Phil dismounted from his horse before a bizarre castle. His body was drenched in sweat, dripping steadily. A subordinate knelt before him. Respectfully, he said, "Your Highness." Phil said coldly, "Report." The man was shocked. "We have discovered that letters were exchanged several times between House Sandra and House Herback." Phil asked, "What was the content?" The man replied nervously, "It concerned some kind of medicine." He continued, "It said they needed more of that medicine." Phil was puzzled. "Medicine?" The man nodded. "Yes. It is made from herbs that grow only in Sandra." He pondered for a moment. "First, find out what kind of medicine it is." The subordinate had already anticipated this. He searched through his bag. "I thought your Highness would ask, so I gathered it in advance." He handed the medicine pouch to Phil, and according to another source, it requested that a large military force move from Sandra to House Herback. Phil held the medicine pouch in his hand and hesitated. "A large force," the man replied. "More precisely, it is for House Herback's inheritance ceremony." Hugo wondered, why would House Herback do that? People say Marquis Conat has long been suffering from an illness related to his mind. He recalled Nivea once saying gloomily, "I never wanted to become a saintess or anything like that. Of course, that was the only way to revive my declining family, so I could only marry Duke Ethios." She had confided in him. "But when I thought about it again, this is my only life, and I realized I do not need to bear every misfortune." She smiled. "Happiness comes from yourself, from your own life." Returning to the present, Phil thought inwardly, if that is the case, then Marquis Herback sent Nivea to the temple and forced her engagement to Duke Ethios while he was not in his right mind. The close aide continued, "And that lady is receiving trust and managing every aspect of the household in his place. Her name is Azula Herback, a member of House Sandra." Phil angrily clenched his fist. He was frustrated. So that is what happened. It seemed the ducal family had gained House Sandra's loyalty. Through House Herback, Phil was worried. I wonder if anything has happened to Nivea in AVO. Meanwhile, Nivea was drenched in sweat and hurrying frantically. Phil pressed a hand to his forehead, frowned tiredly, and said, "We have confirmed the contents of the letters from Duke Ethios. He will soon arrive in the southeastern region." He suddenly called softly, "Eden." As soon as the name was called, an image flashed across. That was Eden. He quickly stepped back, knelt, bowed his head, and answered yes. Phil glanced over and asked, "What do you think of the person behind you?" Eden was bewildered and wondered to himself, "Is His Highness testing me?" Then he hesitantly said, "I believe that." Eden furrowed his brow, his eyes firm with conviction. Nivea Herback is a willful person. She is Duke Ethios' fiancée. But before he could finish, Phil cut him off. No, Eden's mouth fell open in surprise. "What?" Phil made it clear to him. "They are not engaged." Hearing that, Eden hurriedly stood up and said, "But the prince said, for what I investigated." Phil interrupted before he could finish. "Enough. All you need to know is that they are not." Eden fell into thought, picturing Nivea, her seductive figure and long red hair, charming enough to captivate anyone. Don't tell me she not only cooked for him, but even charmed the prince in that short amount of time. Does she see him as some kind of cooking ingredient? Phil turned around and hurried off. "It will take longer to get back. We leave for Adam at once." As he walked, he thought about that girl, Nivea Herback. He continued thinking about Nivea's engagement. She is not someone who lies. I believe she really did cancel the engagement between them. At that moment, Nivea's image appeared in his mind, smiling with beautiful, gentle grace. I am sure the rumor simply has not spread far yet, because it was only a verbal agreement. I believe she acted according to her own convictions and helped those children because it was the right thing to do. At that thought, he suddenly stopped. He furrowed his brow in contemplation. Then why that engagement ring? Phil shook his head again and again, trying to cast those thoughts away. He placed a hand on his horse and climbed up. Sitting on horseback, he thought of her. Even if she speaks a little rudely, she is not wicked or scheming. Beneath the star-filled night sky, his gaze drifted into the distance as he thought Adam. Adam. With an A, the horse sped swiftly down the road. At the same time, Nivea was hiding by the base of a tree, shocked and terrified. I thought I was done for. Before her stood two enormous monsters, making her break out in a cold sweat. She looked down on their appearance with disgust. They're even more hideous than goblins and giants. Their heads are huge too, and their arms and legs are muscular. But what is with those stomachs? Does their ugliness grow in proportion to their size? Nivea sighed and thought, if I could, I would just turn around and go back. But the problem is, tears streamed down her face as she looked out toward her belongings. All of my things are there. Her belongings, such as her horse and her bag of food, as well as the small bag containing her map, were by the roadside. She cried out in misery. My horse, my food, my water, and even my map. There was also a white cloth bundle there. She thought, even my precious egg. Sometime earlier, Nivea had been holding her horse's reins, full of excitement. I just need to do as the knight told me. She looked around, intending to sleep. First, she needed a place that looked suitable for sleeping. The surroundings were dark and overgrown with tall trees. She said, a place with lots of trees, so it will be easier to hide. Nivea tied her horse to a nearby tree. She tied it firmly to the trunk. Then I light a small fire to keep warm. After tying up the horse, she walked off cheerfully and said, I need to go find branches and leaves. Contrary to her cheerful mood when she had left to gather branches and leaves, she was now sobbing as she saw two monsters standing near her belongings. She cried while clasping her hands in prayer. Please, God. But God answered, Who was the one who abandoned me first? The monsters bared their fangs, their fierce eyes looking as though they wanted to swallow someone alive, and made strange chattering noises. Nivea's horse, tied to the base of the tree, reared up when it sensed danger and neighed. The monster drew closer and closer to the horse, chattering. The frightened horse cried out even louder, struggling desperately to escape. As the monsters' faces twisted, they became even more savage and horrifying. Chattering, one raised a club high and struck the horse. Blood splattered everywhere. Seeing the scene before her, she was shocked and terrified. The sight of the monster holding a club covered in blood after beating her horse to death made Nivea think I was actually being far too optimistic. If I lured them away and dealt with them one by one, I thought I could handle them all, even if it took time. She clenched her fists, trembling with anger. And I have experience hunting goblins from before. Nivea looked down, sweat dripping as she thought. Against that level of strength, there's only one outcome. She frowned, trembling in fear as she imagined the certain result. She would be smashed into paste. Nivea glanced outside, not knowing what to do. What should I do? She lowered her head, sweating as she thought. My mind is completely blank. Even if I run away. Her eyes widened as she looked outside. Who says I won't run into another monster on the road? Nivea clutched the tree and cried, with no way to escape those two monsters. And how am I supposed to reach Adam without a map? And without a horse, do I have to walk? The monster was butchering her horse. She thought, at the very least, I have to save my precious egg. That is my darling baby. As if discovering something, it let out a chattering cry. It picked up the white cloth bundle containing Nivea's egg and made a questioning sound, as though it did not understand what it was. She was frightened out of her wits, her face turning pale when she saw it holding her precious egg bundle. She screamed inwardly, no. The monster beside it pointed at its throat, meaning that it was for eating. The other one then seemed to understand and grunted. Nivea sobbed and wailed miserably. No, that thing is not food. You're ugly on the outside, and even uglier on the inside. You bastards. Suddenly, her eyes caught sight of something. Nivea's mouth fell open, her eyes round as she stared. Nervously, she looked at a pure white horse shining with a sparkling glow. She thought, is that a baby horse? A foal? Hiding behind the bushes, she stared intently at the tied-up little horse, worried. So that means I need that foal to stay alive. Nivea carefully thought, what can I do? I have a bow and arrows in my hands. But is that enough to knock out those two demons? She grew anxious. No way. The moment I shoot one of them, the other will probably split my head open like a watermelon. And one arrow won't do much to those demons anyway. She anxiously looked around the tree. I need to find branches. Nivea helplessly shed tears. Dry grass, dirt. I'm going to cry. Suddenly, she seemed to realize something. No, wait. What is this? Looking at the giant footprints on the ground, Nivea thought, they look like the things displayed in museums I used to visit when I was little. Dinosaur feet? She compared the size of the footprint with her hand. The difference was like heaven and earth. Her face turned pale. In that case, whichever side I choose, it is life or death. Nivea immediately followed the footprints. She arrived at a rushing stream and stopped. Nivea realized, found it. Another monster was soaking in the cool stream, happily whistling nonstop. Nivea stood to the side, hiding behind the tree canopy, trembling with fear. It's ridiculously huge. Looking at the monster wriggling around made her feel sick. She frowned. Forget it. It looks even stronger than those hideous demons over there. Nivea took a deep breath. She boldly raised her bow straight, her posture dignified like a knight. Nivea hesitated slightly. The goal is not to kill it. She aimed straight at the big brute's plump backside. The arrow struck his rear, and the demon froze, unable to react. But only a few seconds later, he screamed in pain, clutching his butt and hopping around. Nivea stood on the bank and taunted him. Hey, I'm over here. The furious demon shed tears and roared. He sprang up and thundered after her with a roar. In that life-or-death situation, Nivea ran for her life. She anxiously glanced back. To her astonishment, he was already right behind her. Nivea's face went purple as she cursed in irritation. Damn it, what does that thing eat to run so fast? Suddenly, her eyes lit up as though she had seen her savior. In the distance, the two demons were busy devouring a deer alive. She rejoiced. I'm here. Seeing her, the two of them were still chewing, but they became very excited. Look, food is running toward us. Today we're going to eat our fill. They got ahead of themselves, thinking life was like a dream, and stood up happily. Why is the ground shaking so much? Is it an earthquake? The other replied, maybe. Suddenly, one of them realized the cruel truth. Mother of mine, look behind that woman. The giant monster was charging toward them at full speed. Nivea was still running as if she had never run before. The other two panicked and split off in two directions, chattering wildly. At once, Nivea took the bundle from her bag. She hurried over to the white horse. Let's go. Seeing her, the horse seemed delighted. She urged the horse, hurry, but no matter how much she pulled the rope, the horse did not move and insisted on standing still. With tears in its eyes, the horse pulled the rope back toward Nivea. By then, the monster had caught up. The sound made her flinch. Nivea gritted her teeth, while the horse's tears kept falling. She calmed herself and comforted it with gentle pats. It's all right. You just need to come with me, she said tenderly. Come on, come on. The little horse neighed. It wriggled its back, and she seemed to realize something. She wondered in confusion, what now? What does it want? Suddenly, Nivea snapped back to reality. She turned to look behind her. The monster had rushed over and smashed the tree beside her. Nivea grabbed the horse and ran. Her mouth was full of desperate pleas. Please, please, I'm begging you, just come with me. Nivea crouched down as an idea flashed through her mind. Don't tell me, she asked. Do you want me to ride you? The horse smiled brightly and nodded. The atmosphere was shattered when the monster slammed down at the spot where Nivea had been standing. Luckily, she dodged it, or she would have been flattened. With all the blood drained from her face, she hugged the little horse tightly. She tensed. Damn it, Phoenix. Nivea immediately leapt onto the horse. Nothing can stop me. Let's go. She was shocked. What? Why are you running so slowly? The horse trotted forward at a steady clop, clop, clop. Nivea fearfully clung tightly to its neck. Behind them, the monster lifted an enormous rock high. He hurled a rock straight at Nivea. This time, there was no saving her. She was stunned. She clutched the horse's mane tightly, indignant. No, it seemed as though everything would end there. But it did not. She slowly opened her eyes. Nivea was dumbfounded. She was in the air, and the horse she had just been riding had now transformed into a magnificent unicorn. It was flying radiantly through the peaceful night sky. Beneath the dazzling stars, Nivea was bewildered. What? The monster below looked stupidly up, unable to understand what had happened. He watched bitterly as Nivea's figure gradually disappeared into the distance. Up above, she sat on the unicorn's back, still shaken by what had just happened. Wait. Now she asked in a panic, are you flying? The unicorn laughed with delight. She foolishly thought to herself, after getting crushed, did my soul fly out of my body? And now I'm floating around with a horse? Lost in her tangled thoughts, Nivea gazed at the horse in fascination. A horse that can fly. At that moment, it cried out happily and landed. It stopped and excitedly showed off, as if asking, I did well, didn't I? Nivea gently stroked its head and asked, are you a unicorn? It agreed. She was puzzled. Why would a unicorn be tied up there? They are all fantastical creatures that only exist in legends. I suppose it is because I am inside a book too. Looking at the innocent unicorn, she felt pity. I should probably return it to its family. It is still so young. Where are your parents? Do you have a family? The little unicorn suddenly began sobbing. Nivea panicked. Don't cry, she said gently. So it seems you got separated from your parents. Is there anywhere you want to go? Without a word, the unicorn immediately snuggled close to her. Nivea stared. Me? You want to come with me? Nivea secretly smiled wickedly. I've secured a means of transportation at the very least. Afterward, she looked around in confusion, searching for shelter. Seeing a hollow beneath two large rocks, she hesitated slightly. A while later, Nivea and the unicorn were sitting comfortably together, warming themselves by a fire after a long, exhausting day. Leaning back, she complained, "Oh, my poor old back." Then she cheerfully said her end-of-day farewell. "Good night, little horse." It happily gave a long neigh. Suddenly, Nivea froze. She remembered something important. "Oh, wait, I have to give you a name first." She thought for a while. The little horse looked at her affectionately, unable to take its eyes off her. Nivea smiled. "Let's see, I have a few ideas." Then she slowly explained, "Since your mane is as white as snow, I'll call you Snow." As soon as it heard that, the horse made its attitude clear. It turned its face away and sighed. Nivea was taken aback. "What? Why are you sighing at me?" She reassured it. All right. I'll think of something else. Since you run as fast as the wind, I'll call you Wind." The little horse still did not like it. She fumbled, "No." Then Windy, an English name to make it sound fancy. It stubbornly refused. Oh, Nivea was getting angry now. She huffed inwardly. "Are you looking down on me? Just you wait. You have to accept one of the names I come up with." After that, she offered a long list of names. Elsa, Longsword Hero. Nana Banana Hero. Lovely Horn. Triceratops. Rhinoceros. Hero. Nivea trembled with anger and clenched her fists. "You can live without a name, then." First, she was fed up. Second, saying so many sharp, horn-related things made her want to eat cocoa corn. Suddenly, the unicorn's eyes lit up. Nivea understood. She asked again, "What did you just neigh about?" The unicorn grew excited and neighed even louder. Nivea was bewildered. "Wait, did you like one of the words I just said?" The unicorn rubbed against her coquettishly. She confirmed, "Was it when I said sharp? Hero? Makes me want to eat?" None of those were right. "Then what is it?" Finally, cocoa corn. As soon as she said that name, the unicorn nodded repeatedly. Nivea was surprised. "You like that name?" "I like it too." She pointed straight ahead and declared firmly, "All right, I've decided. Cocoa corn, I choose you." In the end, she had chosen a suitable name for cocoa corn. Delighted, she lay back and relaxed. Suddenly, old memories flooded back, making Nivea nostalgic. Now I really want to eat cocoa corn." Hearing that, cocoa corn panicked. Nivea stared blankly. "I wasn't talking about you." Thinking of the distant future, Nivea smiled from time to time. Outside, the sky had turned pitch black, packed with countless sparkling stars. She thought of Phil the knight. He must have arrived by now. Actually, he probably arrived ages ago. Nivea felt bored. There's no one to travel with and talk to. How boring. She smiled wickedly. He's probably craving seasoning powder so badly his whole body is itching. Suddenly, she remembered Phil's criticism. "You really are a foolish girl." Angry, she flailed about. "That rotten night. Just wait until we meet again." Cocoa corn jumped in fright. "I'll beat you up for daring to call me foolish." Elsewhere, the blue sky stretched high and vast, strangely peaceful and picturesque. Phil stopped before a solemn, sprawling castle standing tall on a cliff. He murmured in admiration, "This place still stands firm, just as it did before." The subordinate standing beside him approached and said, "Your Highness, I will go inside first and report your arrival." Phil nodded. For a moment, he fell into thought. He leisurely rode his horse forward, his face filled with melancholy. The gates opened. A red-haired woman stepped out warmly. She was Frelia. "You have grown taller." Phil dismounted. "Isn't it that you have grown smaller, Lady Frelia?" She laughed with delight. "Ah, I still remember when the two of us were the same height, the last time we met." Phil felt somewhat wistful. Many years have passed. Frelia looked at him affectionately. "Why did you come here without telling me first? Is there some urgent matter?" Phil bowed his head. "I apologize for coming so suddenly, but we need to speak inside immediately." She agreed. "Oh, of course. You must be tired after the long journey here." She ordered servants. "Quickly receive our honored guest." "Yes, my lady." Frelia quietly followed Phil's steps. She was furious. "That Duke," she glared. "He has finally made his move." The butler led Phil and his subordinate into the mansion. He bowed respectfully. "I will prepare your clothes and bring bathwater for you at once." Phil ordered, "Eat and go rest." His subordinate replied, "Yes, your highness." Phil quietly set his sword down on the table. Then, at an unhurried pace, he removed his armor. He gradually took off his shirt as well, revealing firm, pale shoulders. Phil's arms were covered in scars. They looked terribly painful, a testament to his willpower and endurance. His body was in peak condition, every muscle clearly defined. Once Phil had taken off his shirt, he rubbed his chest and looked around. He thought to himself, I can't even remember when I first picked up a sword, because I have always carried one. The world had been a chaotic place when he was young. The war with the neighboring kingdom had not ended in his grandfather's time, and all food was sent to the army. As a result, the people starved to death. The national treasury had been drained to buy weapons for the war, and then the people were drained as well through all manner of taxes. But the war could not be stopped. If either kingdom lost, its people would all die rather than merely endure poverty and hunger. That was why Phil had grown so strong in the kingdom of Erasin. Phil had undergone harsh physical training from a young age. His father shouted, "Focus your mind. The second time you drop your sword will be the second time you lose your life." And this young man had a very strict master. Even when his body was battered and in ruins, Phil still had to get back up and fight. That master was none other than his father, one of the three greatest sword masters of the kingdom. His father glanced at him and warned him sternly, "The moment you hesitate before your fear, those who follow you will die. That is why you must never retreat." For this young man, gaining new scars on his body was an everyday occurrence. Phil was a steadfast man. He never hesitated to pass through any field, from killing people to hunting monsters. Returning to the present, he thought, fortunately, the war ended just as father took the throne, and victory belonged to the kingdom of Erasin, not the opposing side. Phil furrowed his brow. It was all thanks to that prophecy. I had no idea when the war would end, a place where I had to take others' lives if I did not want to be killed. The god Herasia had spoken. If you wish to die so badly, then I will end you with my own hands. That was when the war ended. To appease the wrath of the god Herasia, both sides joined hands in peace. But that did not mean they truly repented. They were only conserving their strength while waiting for a different power, one even higher. Father worked himself to the bone to restore the kingdom devastated by war. And what he received in return was a body no longer as healthy as before. He was gradually weakening, though father tried to hide it. Even though he endured it, the rumors had secretly spread everywhere. And the one whose power allowed them to show off while father grew weaker was Duke Theos. Phil bitterly ground his teeth. Father's sacrifice cannot possibly be handed over to them along with the entire kingdom. It did not matter who won or lost between the king's faction and the duke's faction. If the civil war spread, the kingdom would grow weaker and weaker, and the sharks that smell blood would begin to attack. Those bastards from the kingdom of Aiken. Suddenly, an announcement rang out. "We have brought the bathwater." Phil came back to his senses. He ordered, "Come in." A group of people laboriously carried in a bathtub full of water. Seeing Eden, Phil was surprised. Then, he continued, "I told you to go rest." Eden answered frankly, "I will attend to your bath." Phil immediately waved him off. "There is no need." Phil said, "Eden, you are the most exhausted one. Go rest. Just go rest. There are no enemies here." Hearing that, Eden's face fell in hurt disappointment. Phil thought to himself, the close guards and shadow guards all listened to me and went to rest. Only Eden keeps following me. I appointed him captain of the shadow guards on my own. Is it too much for him? Eden hurriedly pleaded, "Please do not refuse me. I will be terribly worried if I cannot see your highness. Please allow me to attend to your bath." Phil worried inwardly. Oh dear, does he have some kind of functional nervous disorder? After we return to the palace, I must give Eden time for a vacation. He answered, "If you insist that much." Eden carefully poured water into the tub. "Your highness, how is the water temperature?" Phil relaxed. "It is perfect." Eden thought to himself, I must prove to him the boundless loyalty of this humble servant. Last time, when I answered a question related to Lady Nivea, the Viscount's daughter, I displeased him. This time, I will not make the same mistake. Suddenly, Phil stood up and began scrubbing himself. Eden Panichkit, Your Highness, please give that to me. Phil refused. No. Eden stopped him and snatched it away, then began scrubbing Phil's back. Seeing Phil's back covered in scars, Eden's heart ached. He exclaimed, "Your Highness truly is." Eden's eyes lit up, the most dignified person in the entire kingdom. His heart was filled with joy. His Highness is no longer an ordinary human. The Prince of the Kingdom of Erasin does not merely have a handsome face or a height worthy of the world's admiration. He is far more than that. Phil replied, "Is that so? Eden secretly réjouit. Success. After the bath, the butler led him to the dining room. Freelia was already waiting there with a table piled high with food. She spoke first, bowing respectfully once again. "It is my honor to meet your Highness the Prince again." She smiled. "Please enjoy your time of rest here in Adam." Phil looked uncomfortable. "Could you stop greeting me so formally?" At that, she proudly clapped him on the shoulder. "Ah," Freelia said fondly. "It seems your shoulders have become sturdier." He replied, "That is because I have always been jealous of your shoulders." He recalled a glorious scene from his childhood. Young Phil stood before Freelia, who held a spear, looking dignified despite his small stature. During the long years of war, Freelia played a central role. She was a knight of the kingdom of Erasin. Even after the war ended, she continued to suppress internal conflicts and exterminate every monster. It would not be an exaggeration to say that she had sacrificed her entire youth for the kingdom. Freelia's achievements were recognized, and she was granted the title and position of countess. Freelia was one of the heroes of the kingdom of Erasin, worthy of the title bestowed upon her. She was also Kelsey's master. During their reunion, Kelsey smiled joyfully at Freelia. "I'm very glad to see you again, master, after such a long time." Freelia smiled and answered, "It is regrettable that I could not roll out a red carpet to welcome you." Kelsey said that this was already more than enough. Although these were not overly luxurious or extravagant dishes, they were foods containing herbs that only grew in Adam territory, fresh green vegetables, and meat from mountain-dwelling monsters. To Kelsey, having a meal like this in such a remote mountain region already felt extremely lavish. While waiting for the cooks to lay out the food, Kelsey chatted with Freelia. "This reminds me of the time we hunted those ogres in the west." Hearing Kelsey mention it, Freelia also recalled the past. "You mean the time when Your Highness the Prince roasted the meat into black charcoal?" Having that embarrassing incident brought up, Kelsey immediately became flustered. "It has been so long. You should forget about that by now." Hearing that, Freelia burst into loud laughter. "How could I forget? They're all precious memories. You said you wanted to get along with us and started cooking things you had never touched before. It still remains in my memory, even now." Kelsey quickly explained, "I can cook well now." Freelia put on a helpless expression. "Yes, I'm sure I believe you." Suddenly, Kelsey stood up. "I've been looking for a while, and I realize something is missing." Seeing this, the chef asked in surprise, "What is the matter, Your Highness?" "No, I'm certain the food has been cooked through completely." Kelsey said to the chef, "Bring me some seasonings." The chef asked what kind of seasoning he wanted. Kelsey immediately said, "Bring them all here." A short while later, every seasoning in the kitchen had been brought before Kelsey. Seeing Kelsey tasting each seasoning one by one, Freelia became worried and whispered to the chef, "We will not have to starve like last time, will we?" At that moment, Kelsey was deep in thought. He was thinking of Nivea. Nivea never told me what seasoning she used, but now I miss that flavor so much. If I had not been in such a hurry, I could have gone to her back and brought her along. He felt rather regretful, thinking he should have asked Nivea for those seasonings back then. After thinking for a while, Kelsey suddenly became very serious and picked up several different jars of seasoning. Both his hands began to move, scattering seasonings over the dishes cooking on the fire. Seeing this, the chef grew worried and tried to stop Kelsey. "Please wait, Your Highness. Those seasonings cannot be used on meat." Ignoring the chef's advice, Kelsey insisted on his own judgment. "No, it must be this." At that moment, the chef began to feel afraid. From his perspective, the chef felt that Kelsey looked like someone addicted to drugs. He wondered who in the world had dared to drug his highness. After seasoning and roasting it himself for a while, Kelsey picked up a skewer of meat and said, "This should be enough." Then he brought the plate of food to Freelia. Freelia looked at the plate of food and could not help asking worriedly, "Kelsey, you're not going to give us stomach trouble, are you?" Faced with Freelia's concern, Kelsey said with a confident expression, "Just tell me honestly whether it is good or not. If it is not good, I will not cook again." "Is that fine?" There were many rumors that a certain herb was being traded secretly and illegally across the continent, one that would make a person's eyes turn red and cause prolonged madness. From the chef's current point of view, Kelsey looked no different from someone affected by that herb. At that moment, Kelsey called Eden over to eat with them. Eden was worried inside, thinking this must be His Highness's third test. Kelsey urged Eden to taste it. Eden began to feel nervous and answered Kelsey hesitantly, "Your Highness, I cannot lie to you. The truth is the truth. Please do not hate me." Kelsey stood beside him with a calm expression. "That is exactly why I want you to taste it and tell me how you feel." Eden felt anxious, thinking, he probably will not kill me, right? Then Eden gritted his teeth, shut his eyes, and took a bite. Suddenly, his expression changed. He looked like a wild beast left all alone after losing its home and its mother. A beast that had grown up eating many kinds of herbs good for the body, training every last muscle in all four legs by running up and down the mountains every day. That was exactly the kind of wild beast he looked like. Eden was now eating with an utterly satisfied expression. He began devouring the food ravenously. Kelsey stood beside him with an expectant look and asked whether the food was good. Seeing Eden eat with such relish, Freelia sat beside him, observed the piece of meat, and judged it. Judging by the color of the meat, it does not seem to be burnt. Then Freelia put it in her mouth to taste it. At that moment, Freelia's expression also began to change. She silently chewed the piece of meat in her mouth. Seeing Freelia react like that, Kelsey grew slightly worried. Does it not suit your taste? Without answering Kelsey's question, Freelia reached for the next skewer of meat and ate it with tremendous relish, leaving the chef beside her somewhat stunned. Suddenly, Eden shouted, "Your Highness!" The meat in front of me suddenly disappeared. I am certain it was stolen by our enemies. On the other side, Freelia kept urging the chef, "Raise the fire, hurry and bring out all the meat." Seeing Freelia and Eden so enthusiastic, Kelsey asked curiously, "What does it taste like?" Freelia looked at Kelsey with satisfied eyes, while Eden wore an expression of happiness. How should I describe it? This flavor is very tasty? Or number one, perfect? Freelia continued, No, those words are not worthy of describing this feeling. Kelsey was pleased. That is right. You are correct. To describe this sensation, you must use a specialized term. Eden and Freelia asked in unison, "What term is that?" At that moment, Kelsey proudly replied, "The term is ridiculously delicious." Freelia and Eden were overcome with happiness.